What's up, everybody? It's Dave and Nance coming at you from the Tillamook forest in Oregon. We're soaking wet. We have a fire going right there. We've been fighting tooth and nail to keep it ablaze all day. It's required a lot of foraging because we didn't buy enough of the commercial wood. Anything else people need to know before we begin this?
Get on our level.
Yeah, that's right.
If you're not out soaking wet, reading books, chopping up huge logs with a hand axe, then you can't talk shit.
What even are you doing?
Yeah.
So today we're going to be reading Byung Chul's Psychopolitics. It is a Verso Futures series published in 2017. Byung Chul is, I would say, a critical media theorist, though he is less Marxist than he is, say, Heideggerian, Baudrillardian, Arendtian, Foucauldian, from what I can tell. But he does think about capitalism and desire and the burnout society created by, well, capitalism. And so that makes him critical, I think. But it's the fact that he's working between all those authors that I like. It's also that he is kind of like this Korean, German guy who kind of reminds me of Sloterdijk sometimes. But that Sloterdijk writes really fat books like Žižek, whereas Byung Chul is about writing really fucking succinctly. He teaches us how to write in a very purposeful way. And he does not, it's like he gets paid for the words he doesn't use. You know what I mean? He takes a lot of inspiration from the Japanese haiku. He thinks that you pack a lot of meaning into a very tight sentence. And so there's a lot of that in this, but it makes it so that, you know, his sort of easy reading is deceptive. It's not actually as easy as it seems because there's so much loaded into every sentence that I think it's going to be good for exegesis. But I haven't read this since I listened to it while cutting lumber out in a field over a year ago. And so now I'm looking for this as a refresher. I suspect we'll be doing a lot more kind of first reading than exegesis, but we'll also stop and talk from time to time. I'm going to take it away.
The crisis of freedom, the exploitation of freedom. Freedom will prove to have been merely an interlude. Freedom is felt when passing from one way of living to another, until this too turns out to be a form of coercion. Then liberation gives way to renewed subjugation. Such is the destiny of the subject, literally, the one who has been cast down. Today, we do not deem ourselves subjugated subjects, but rather projects, always refashioning and reinventing ourselves. A sense of freedom attends passing from the state of subject to that of project. All the same, this projection amounts to a form of compulsion and constraint, indeed, to a more efficient kind of subjectivization and subjugation. As a project deeming itself free of external and alien limitations, the I is now subjugating itself to internal limitations and self-constraints, which are taking the form of compulsive achievement and optimization. We are living in a particular phase of history. Freedom itself is bringing forth compulsion and constraint. The freedom of can generates even more coercion than the disciplinarian should, which issues commandments and prohibitions. Should has a limit. In contrast, can has none. Thus, the compulsion entailed by can is unlimited, and so we find ourselves in a paradoxical situation. Technically, freedom means the opposite of coercion and compulsion. Being free means being free from constraint, but now freedom itself, which is supposed to be the opposite of constraint, is producing coercion. Psychic maladies such as depression and burnout express a profound crisis of freedom. They represent pathological signs that freedom is now switching over into manifold forms of compulsion.
It makes me think of Todd McGowan's essay in Underground Theory.
Yeah.
Right? Freedom as freedom from compulsion and constraint fails to understand freedom as self-limitation. And so McGowan's whole point is that capitalism telling us that we have unlimited can That point is that it's not freedom. Unlimited can is not freedom. Although the achievement subject deems itself free, in reality it is a slave. Insofar as it willingly exploits itself without a master, it is an absolute slave. There is no master forcing the achievement subject to work. Yet all the same, it is absolutizing bare life and labor. Bare life and labor form two sides of the same coin. Health represents the ideal of bare life. Today's neoliberal slave lacks the sovereignty, indeed the freedom, of the master who, according to Hegel's dialectic, performs to labor at all and only enjoys. Performs no labor at all and only enjoys. For Hegel, the sovereignty of the master derives from his rising above bare life and risking death itself in the process. Bellum. Such excess, living and enjoying beyond measure, is alien to the slave, who worries only about bare life. But counter to what Hegel assumed, laboring does not make the slave free. The slave remains
Enslaved.
The slave remains enslaved to labor. Now, the slave is forcing the master to work too. Today's dialectic of master and slave means the totalization of labor. As the entrepreneur of its own self, the neoliberal subject has no capacity for relationships with others that might be free of purpose. Nor do entrepreneurs know what purpose-free friendship would even look like. Originally, being free meant being among friends. Freedom and friendship have the same root in Indo-European languages. Fundamentally, freedom signifies a relationship. A real feeling of freedom occurs only in a fruitful relationship, when being with others brings happiness. But today's neoliberal regime leads to utter isolation. As such, it does not really free us at all. Accordingly, the question now is whether we need to redefine freedom, to reinvent it, in order to escape from the fatal dialectic that is changing freedom into coercion.
Neoliberalism represents a highly efficient, indeed an intelligent system for exploiting freedom. Everything that belongs to practices and expressive forms of liberty, emotion, play, and communication comes to be exploited. It is inefficient to exploit people against their will. Allo exploitation yields scant results. Only when freedom is exploited are returns maximized. It is interesting to note that Marx also defines freedom in terms of a successful relationship to others. Only in community with others does each individual have the means of cultivating his gift in all directions. Only in the community, therefore, is personal freedom possible. From this perspective, being free means nothing other than self-realization with others. Freedom is synonymous with a working community, i.e., a successful one. For Marx, individual freedom represents a ruse, a trick of capital. Free competition, which is based on the idea of individual freedom, simply amounts to the relation of capital to itself as another capital, i.e., the real conduct of capital as capital. Capital reproduces by entering into relations with itself as another form of capital, through free competition. It copulates with the other of itself by way of individual freedom. Capital grows inasmuch as people engage in free competition. Hereby, individual freedom amounts to servitude inasmuch as capital lays hold of it and uses it for its own propagation. That is, capital exploits individual freedom in order to breed. It is not the individuals who are set free by free competition. It is, rather, capital which is set free.
I'm eating my words right now.
Yeah.
Here I was like, oh, he's not really engaging with Marxism much. Okay, I forgot about this part, obviously.
The freedom of capital achieves self-realization by way of individual freedom. In the process, individuals degrade into the genital organs of capital. Individual freedom lends it an automatic subjectivity of its own, which spurs it to reproduce actively. In this way, capital continuously brings forth living offspring. Today, individual freedom is taking on excessive forms. Ultimately, this amounts to nothing other than the excess of capital itself.
The dictatorship of capital. At a certain level of development, according to Marx, the forces of production, human labor, modes of work, and the material means available come into conflict with the dominant relations of production, conditions of ownership and domination. Contradiction arises because the forces of production never stop evolving. Thus, industrialization brings forth new forces of production that come into conflict with structures of ownership and government that still resemble feudal conditions. In turn, this contradiction entails social crises, pushes to change the relations of production. For Marx, the contradiction is to be eliminated by way of the proletariat's struggle against the bourgeoisie, which will bring forth a communist social order. But get ready for the post-Marxism. Here we go, guys. But, counter to what Marx assumed, communist revolution cannot resolve the contradiction between forces of production and the relations of production. The contradiction admits to no dialectical Aufhebung. No sublation here, guys. Capitalism can always escape into the future precisely because it harbors permanent and inherent contradiction. Accordingly, industrial capitalism has now mutated into neoliberalism and financial capitalism, which are implementing a post-industrial, immaterial mode of production instead of turning into communism. As a mutant form of capitalism, neoliberalism transforms workers into entrepreneurs. It is not communist revolution that is now abolishing the allo-exploited working class. Instead, neoliberalism is in the course of doing so. Today, everyone is an auto-exploitating laborer in his or her own enterprise. People are now master and slave in one. Even class struggle has transformed into an inner struggle against oneself. The cooperative multitude that Antonio Negri has exalted as the post-Marxist successor to the proletariat does not describe the contemporary mode of production. Rather, conditions are defined by the solitude of an entrepreneur who is isolated and self-combating and practices auto-exploitation voluntarily. This is solitude used as a synonym for isolation, not how we use it in CMT. And so, yeah, this is just isolation, as opposed to the rich, freedom-filled kind of solitude that can be guaranteed by actually having your time energy. Here, I can take it. He's got to go move logs. We were just talking about how the mass age is not the multitude, using Gnosko and McLuhan and Baudrillard. And so this is really fucking good. The fact is I read this before and forgot that I had read it, but that shit is dope. That is exactly what we were getting at. And we were thinking that, I thought I was making that connection like for the first time. I didn't realize I'd read Byung Chul Han making that connection. That's why no one should ever trust the idea of originality.
Yeah, man.
In fact, no proletariat exists under the neoliberal regime at all. There is no working class being exploited by those who own the means of production. When production is immaterial, everyone already owns the means of production, him or herself. The neoliberal system is no longer a class system in the proper sense. It does not consist of classes that display mutual antagonism. This is what accounts for the system's stability. Now, I know that would...
Meta-stability.
I know that this would just, like, make everybody in the materialist online left very angry. But I think this is exactly why we're bothered as working class people by the mobilization of this, the uncritical mobilization of this idea of a working class that could go from in itself to for itself, when that distinction was originally raised in itself, for itself, back in the Second International.
In the days of an actual proletariat.
There was an actual proletariat. There were actual workers' institutions fighting for recognition, representation, and freedom from work. And since then, now it's just unions. Everyone's just like, well, you should get involved with a union. But there is no Workers' International. There is no workers' institutions in any real sense. And anything that could be called class today is more probably a caste. And that's why the only real way to get into it is with credentials through specialization if you were getting good grades through the schooling system that was built to produce professionals and managers versus undeserving workers, right? Today,
I will fight people who all they ever want to do is organize harder.
That's why ants will fight people who all they ever want to do is organize harder, which is what our shit's going to be about in Seattle in like 5 days from now. Today, the distinction between proletarian and bourgeoisie no longer holds either. Literally, proletarian means someone whose sole possession are his or her children. Self-production is restricted to biological reproduction. But now the illusion prevails that every person, as a project free to fashion him or herself at will, is capable of unlimited self-production. This means that a dictatorship of the proletariat is structurally impossible. Today, the dictatorship of capital rules over everyone. I love that, because he's not post-thinking about capital. He's just post-thinking about these old categories.
Exactly.
Capital still rules over everyone. The neoliberal, I wish you'd say neo-feudal regime, because that's really what he's getting at. But he's saying neoliberal because that is the buzzword of today.
Well, and we have to flesh out this idea of neo-feudalism. It's being used by several thinkers.
I don't know that they can hear you on this camera right now.
Well, you can relate what I'm saying. That's a concept that's still in its nascency.
True, neo-feudalism has not been fleshed out yet.
All right. Kind of what we're doing with CMT.
That is what we're doing with CMT and PMC as like two separate threads that constantly relate. However, wait. People who fail in the neoliberal achievement society see themselves as responsible for their lot and feel shame instead of questioning society or the system. Herein lies the particular intelligence defining the neoliberal regime. No resistance to the system can emerge in the first place. In contrast, when allo exploitation prevails, the exploited are still able to show solidarity and unite against those who exploit them. Such is the logic on which Marx's idea of the dictatorship of the proletariat is based. However, this vision presupposes that relations of repression and domination hold. Now, under the neoliberal regime of auto-exploitation, people are turning their aggression against themselves. This auto-aggressivity means that the exploited are not inclined to revolution so much as depression. Which is fucking powerful if you think back about Anne's Kansas City presentation on how the PMC ruined her life.
Yep.
Fucking... Oh, wait. No, that wasn't the PMC ruined her life. That was in...
Talented Trap. PMC ruined her life was in Pomona.
That was in Pomona. Kansas City was the Gifted and Talented Trap. The two obviously go really well together because it's getting at the same thing. It's getting at the fact that she can't just be. She has to be a project.
Yeah.
And obviously we're out here camping, but are we doing odium or skol? No, this is not odium. Arguably it could be skole. We obviously have our relative time energy to be out here doing this, but this is a project. Here Underground is a project. We're out here projecting. We're not out here chilling.
But the fact that we have fun while doing it shows both kind of resolve.
It doesn't feel like work.
Yeah. But it's
like,
also...
no. It does feel like work. It doesn't feel like a job.
Right. Yeah.
Because there's nothing wrong with work or labor, but there's something wrong with a job.
Yeah.
In our world, we no longer work in order to satisfy our own needs. Instead, we work for capital. Capital generates needs of its own. Mistakenly, we perceive these needs as if they belong to us, right? This is why he's Baudrillard-pilled. Baudrillard spends a long time taking down this idea of needs and capitalism having anything to do with use or needs in, I think, the mirror of production. Capital, therefore, represents a new kind of transcendence, which entails a new form of subjectivization. We are being expelled from the sphere of lived immanence, where life relates to life instead of subjugating itself to external ends. Emancipation from a transcendent order, that is, an order grounded in religious premises, is the hallmark of modern politics. Only under modern conditions, when transcendental means of justification no longer possess any validity, is a genuine politics, the politicization of society as a whole, held to be possible. Now, norms of action are supposed to be subject to negotiation at every level. Norms of action are supposed to be subject to negotiation at every level. Transcendence will yield to discourse immanent to society itself. Society, the reasoning goes, can construct itself anew, purely from within, on the basis of immanent properties. However, such freedom vanishes just as soon as capital achieves the status of being a new transcendency, a new master. When this occurs, politics lapses into servitude again. It becomes the handmaiden of capital.
Do we really want to be free? Didn't we invent God so we wouldn't have to be free? Before God, we are all debtors, guilty. But debt, guilt, destroys freedom. Today, politicians appeal to high debt rates to explain that their freedom to act is massively restricted. Free from debt, that is wholly free, we would surely have to act. Perhaps we run up debts perpetually so we don't need to do so. That is, so we won't need to be free or responsible. Don't our debts prove that we don't have the power to be free? Could it be that capital is a new god, making us guilty and debt-ridden again? Walter Benjamin held that capitalism is a religion. As he put it, capitalism represents the first case of a cult that creates guilt, not atonement. Since there is no possibility of relieving debt and guilt, the state of unfreedom perpetuates itself. A vast sense of guilt that is unable to find itself seizes on the cult, not to atone for this guilt, but to make it universal. The dictatorship of transparency. Initially, the internet was celebrated as a medium of boundless liberty. Microsoft's early advertising slogan, "Where do you want to go today?" suggested unlimited freedom and mobility on the web. As it turned out, such euphoria was an illusion. Today, unbounded freedom and communication are switching over into total control and surveillance. More and more, social media resemble digital panoptica, keeping watch over the social realm and exploiting it mercilessly. We had just freed ourselves from the disciplinary panopticon. Then we threw ourselves into a new and even more efficient panopticon. Jeremy Bentham's panopticon isolated inmates from each other for disciplinary purposes and prevented them from interacting. In contrast, the occupants of today's digital panopticon actively communicate with each other and willingly expose themselves. That is, they collaborate in the digital panopticon's operations. Digital control society makes intensive use of freedom. This can only occur thanks to voluntary self-illumination and self-exposure. Digital Big Brother outsources operations to inmates, as it were. Accordingly, data is not surrendered under duress so much as offered out of an inner need. That is why the digital panopticon proves so efficient. Transparency is demanded in the name of freedom of information too. In reality, however, this amounts to nothing other than a neoliberal dispositive. It means turning everything inside out by force and transforming it into information. Under the immaterial mode of production that now prevails, more information and more communication mean more productivity, acceleration, and growth. Information represents a positive value inasmuch as it lacks interiority. It can circulate independently, free from any and all context. Accordingly, the circulation of information admits acceleration at will, for purely arbitrary reasons. Secrets, foreignness, and otherness represent impediments to unbounded communication. In the name of transparency, they are to be eliminated. Communication goes faster when it is smoothed out. That is, when thresholds, walls, and gaps are removed. This also means stripping people of interiority, which blocks and slows down communication. However, such emptying out of persons does not occur by violent means. Instead, it occurs as voluntary self-exposure. The negativity of otherness or foreignness is de-interiorized and transformed into the positivity of communicable and consumable difference, diversity. The dispositive of transparency effects utter exteriorization in order to accelerate the circulation of information and speed of communication. Ultimately, openness facilitates unrestricted communication, whereas closedness, reserve, and interiority obstruct it.
The dispositive of transparency has the further consequence of promoting total conformity. The economy of transparency seeks to suppress deviation. Total networking, total communication already has a leveling effect per se. Its effect is conformity. It is as if everyone were watching over everyone else. even before intelligence agencies or secret services have stepped in to supervise and steer.
Silence is violence.
He is missing the fact that this whole thing was built by the intelligence agency.
Yeah.
Like, everyone forgets about that because it's not the main narrative about the origins of the internet.
Yeah.
Which is why we got to do Surveillance Valley, Yasha Levine. Invisible moderators smooth out communication, and we are doing that in the next CMT 6-month session. Invisible moderators smooth out communication and calibrate it to what is generally understood and accepted. Such primary, intrinsic surveillance proves much more problematic than the secondary, extrinsic surveillance undertaken by secret services and spying agencies. Neoliberalism makes citizens into consumers. The freedom of the citizen yields to the passivity of the consumer. As consumers, today's citizen yields to the passivity of the consumer. As consumers, today's voters have no real interest in politics and actively shaping the community. They possess neither the will nor the ability to participate in communal political action. They react only passively to politics, grumbling and complaining as consumers do about a commodity or service they do not like. In that light, you could read political articles and video essays and streams and shows and everything being done there as an elaborate form of Yelp.
Yep.
Politicians and parties follow this logic of consumption too. They have to deliver. In the process, they become nothing more than suppliers. Their task is to satisfy voters who are consumers or customers. And that just makes me think about how we're inevitably going to be called anti-political or post-political, but in the same way that people accuse us of being postmodern, when it's like, no, the conditions are postmodern. The conditions are anti-political. The conditions are post-political. We're just pointing and saying, guys, look!
Yeah.
And then they're like, nah, they're just trying to take the steam out of our movement. No, we're just a couple of guys on the internet pointing out what's going on, and we're doing it with all the greatest thinkers from the last 100 years, which you guys aren't in dialogue with, because you guys think you guys can keep repeating the same old tracts.
Right.
The transparency demanded of politicians today is anything but a political demand. Transparency is not called for in political decision-making processes. No consumer is interested in that. Instead, and above all, the imperative transparency serves to expose or unmask politicians to make them an item of scandal. The call for transparency presupposes occupying the position of a shocked spectator. It is not voiced by engaged citizens so much as by passive onlookers. That's all this accountability culture shit too. It is not voiced by engaged citizens so much as by passive onlookers. Participation now amounts to grievance and complaint. With that, the society of transparency inhabited by onlookers and consumers has given rise to a spectator democracy.
An essential component of freedom is informational self-determination. The 1984 ruling on the census made by the German Federal Constitutional Court already declared, if citizens cannot know who knows what, when, and on what occasion about them, the right to informational self-determination is incompatible with social order and the legal order facilitating the same. That said, this ruling was made at a time when people commonly believed they were facing the state as an instance of domination, which wrested information from citizens against their will. Such a time is long past. Today, we voluntarily expose ourselves without any external constraint at all, without an edict commanding us to do so. Of our own free will, we put any and all conceivable information about ourselves on the internet without having the slightest idea who knows what, when, or on what occasion.
Fucking for real.
This lack of control represents a crisis of freedom to be taken seriously. Indeed, given the data that people make available willy-nilly, the very idea of protecting privacy is becoming obsolete. Today, we are entering the age of digital psychopolitics. It means passing from passive surveillance to active steering. As such, it is precipitating a further crisis of freedom. Now, free will itself is at stake. Big data is a highly efficient psychopolitical instrument that makes it possible to achieve comprehensive knowledge of the dynamics of social communication. This knowledge is knowledge for the sake of domination and control. It facilitates intervention in the psyche and enables influence to take place on a pre-reflexive level. For human beings to be able to act freely, the future must be open. However, big data is making it possible to predict human behavior. This means that the future is becoming calculable and controllable. Digital psychopolitics transforms the negativity of freely made decisions into the positivity of factual states. Indeed, persons are being positivized into things, which can be quantified, measured, and steered.
Yep.
Needless to say, no thing can be free, but at the same time, things are more transparent than persons. Big data has announced the end of the person who possesses free will.
And I just want to tie that back to structural stultification of time energy. The emptying out of the subject is in part this, constantly having to turn ourselves into projects that are intelligible to others, constantly having to narrativize ourselves, and so we turn ourselves inside out.
Yep.
And then get invaded by capital. But also the structural stultification of time energy is a fundamental aspect of all of this because we can't go deeper. We can't. He talks about this unlimited can, but that unlimited can is at the level of commodity consumption. It's not at the level of higher forms of consumption that you can't buy with money. You can only invest in or sacrifice for with time energy.
Yep. Every dispositive, every technology or technique of domination brings forth characteristic devotional objects that are employed in order to subjugate. Such objects materialize and stabilize dominion. Devotion and related words mean submission or obedience. Smartphones represent digital devotion. Indeed, they are the devotional objects of the digital, period. As a subjectivization apparatus, the smartphone works like a rosary, which, because of its ready availability, represents a handheld device too.
I love that as a rosary.
Yeah. Both the smartphone and the rosary serve the purpose of self-monitoring and control. Power operates more effectively when it delegates surveillance to discrete individuals. Like is the digital amen.
Amen.
When we click like, we are bowing down to the order of domination. The smartphone is not just an effective surveillance apparatus, it is also a mobile confessional. Facebook is the church, the global synagogue, literally assembly of the digital.
Which he uppercases, and I know that you like to talk about the digital.
The digital, yeah.
Is this the same digital for you?
Yeah, but no, because mine is more postmodern. But yeah, like it is the idea of we have to produce ourselves and we're like objects already on the other side of it. And it is a new god.
Do you think that it's really more postmodern? Then I'm open to this. I want to find out. But I mean, he might be more postmodern than you think he is.
That's true too.
But not postmodern as a literary movement where it's just it's a set of dogmas. No, we just literally believe that we are in this
postmodern condition.
We are in this post-truth phase of development. Yeah.
But I think we've been that way since the Industrial Revolution, and I don't think he thinks that.
Okay, it goes back further for you.
Yeah.
And then,
which is why I want to read that Latour thing.
Oh, has theory run out of steam?
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll do that one for sure. That one's a lot of fun. It's also pretty short. Oh, you mean how we've never been modern?
We were never modern.
Oh, you mean that one?
Yeah.
That book.
Modernity was always a lie.
Yeah.
It's always been post-modernity.
It was always already a simulacrum.
Yeah.
Right, but you also do believe that there is something real we have access to in some way.
Yeah, but outside of capital relations, which we don't have access to that yet.
Well, we saw our kitty cat last night refuse to play with the laser pointer because he was more interested in the sounds of the night in nature.
Yeah, but we're not cats. But
there's something there.
There is something there. There's definitely something there, for sure. And the cat is becoming more and more a theoretical fellow traveler as time goes on. Ryan Gosling is gonna make a contribution.
Yeah.
He already has.
He's helping us crack the code, dude.
Yeah, dude.
He's helping us crack the code. No, but the first night you camped out here, you had like an anxiety attack or a panic attack.
Yeah.
Like, there's something out here.
Yeah, and the nutrient density, we were calling it. Yes. Yeah, there's a density here in the woods, and there's also a density in the city.
Right, I was talking about nutrient density and biodiversity, the millions of organisms and species that we can't even sense consciously, but that our unconscious does sense.
Yeah.
That shit matters, because if the unconscious is the outside in the Lacanian sense, which is also a Heideggerian sense of being a referential totality of equipment, then when you're out here, your sensory apparatus at the level of the unconscious does rewild to some degree, right? And that's what was causing the anxiety attack, is because like you are not connected to that normal circumspective concern. Yeah. Though obviously we are to some degree reconnected right now through this panopticon, through our projecting, through our mediation of our sensory apparatuses. We're not off the grid right now, because this is going to go out on the internet as far as we're concerned. We think it will.
But the intentionality here is different. So, yeah, we're still on the inside, but at least we're believing in an outside.
Right, and that's why we have so that's the thing. It's like people hear you say that you're postmodern 5 minutes ago, but now everything we've said since then kind of like challenges their assumptions about what that means to be postmodern, because we're not just saying, yeah, well, it's the end of history, it's all a bunch of floating signifiers now.
Yeah.
We're just floating in the maelstrom. But
that's the conditions we have to deal with.
Right.
Due to our situatedness. But like there is an outside.
And it's not just noumena.
Right. Yeah. It's not that outside.
All right, well, now we're on chapter 2, so that's pretty cool.
Chapter 2.
Let's actually do this. All right, let's do chapter 2 now.
Chapter 2.
By the way, Ryan is so warm. At some point, we'll swap, because you got to have a turn with Ryan.
Yeah.
He's so warm right now. He's so sweet. And he's like pushing himself up on my hand this whole time.
Yeah.
He's sleeping, but he's like pushing himself up at the same time. Oh my God.
Smart power. Power commands highly different modes of appearance. Its most direct and immediate form finds expression as the negation of freedom. This enables power holders to impose their will against the will of those who subject to power by violence, if need be. However, power is not limited to breaking down resistance and forcing obedience. It need not take the form of coercion. Power that relies on violence does not represent power of the highest order. The mere fact that another will manages to form and turn against the power holder attests to the latter's weakness. Wherever power does not come into view at all, it exists without question. The greater power is, the more quietly it works. It just happens. It has no need to draw attention to itself.
I love that, and I love his book on power where he elaborates on this.
To be sure, power can express itself as violence or repression, but it is not based on force. Power need not exclude, prohibit, or censor. Nor does it stand opposed to freedom. Indeed, power can even use freedom to its own ends. Only in its negative form does power manifest itself as a violence that says no by shattering the will and annulling freedom. Today, power is assuming increasingly permissive forms. In its permissivity, indeed in its friendliness, power is shedding its negativity and presenting itself as freedom. Disciplinary power is still commanded by negativity. Its mode of articulation is inhibitive, not permissive. Because it is negative, it does not describe the neoliberal regime, which beams forth in positivity. The neoliberal regime's technology of power takes on subtle, supple, and smart forms. Thereby, it escapes all visibility. Now, the subjugated subject is not even aware of its own subjugation. The whole context of domination remains entirely hidden. Consequently, the subject thinks itself free.
inasmuch as it expends a great deal of energy to force people into the straitjacket of commandments and prohibitions, disciplinary power proves inefficient. A significantly more efficient technology of power makes sure that people subordinate themselves to power relations on their own. What were we reading just the other day about that?
Or do? Or no. The happiness industry.
That's right. Such a dynamic seeks to activate, motivate, and optimize, not to inhibit or repress. It proves so effective because it does not operate by means of forbidding and depriving, but by pleasing and fulfilling. Instead of making people compliant, it seeks to make them dependent. Power that is smart and friendly does not operate frontally, as in against the will of those who are subject to it. Instead, it guides their will to its own benefit. It says yes more often than no. It operates seductively, not repressively. It seeks to call forth positive emotions and exploit them. It leads astray instead of erecting obstacles. Instead of standing opposed to the subject, smart and friendly power meets the subject halfway. Smart power cozies up to the psychic rather than disciplining it through coercion or prohibitions. Do we know if this is translated, or is he writing in English?
I think he's writing in English.
I think he's writing in English, and I think he's like speaking at least 5 languages, and he's reading and writing in at least 5 languages, because he's got Chinese, Japanese, Korean, German, English, probably French. Motherfucker.
We'll get there, dude.
People are acting like he's some pop thinker like Elaine Baton or some shit. He's not! Byung Chul Han's the real deal, guys. And I know that it's like, yeah, no, it comes off like a bunch of assertions based out of all the thinkers I listed at the beginning of this, right? Like, that's where he's coming from. And I fucking love it. So, but what I just thought that because it's like the word cozies is a really good English word, man. And it's like I think that means he's just pretty based in English too. It's like Žižek also writes in English, but I think Sloterdijk writes in German and gets translated.
I think he does both.
He does both?
I think he does both.
Okay. Yeah. There's something special about Žižek, Sloterdijk, and Han that is different than any other living theorists. Like these three really are something special to me. Smart power. And you know, Arendt did the same shit. She would also write in English. Smart power cozies up the psychic rather than disciplining it through a coercion or prohibitions. It does not impose silence. Rather, it is constantly calling on us to confide, share, and participate, to communicate our opinions, needs, wishes, and preferences, to tell all about our lives. Friendly power proves more powerful, as it were, than purely repressive power. It manages not to be seen at all. Today's crisis of freedom stems from the fact that the operative technology of power does not negate or repress freedom so much as exploit it. Free choice is eliminated to make way for a free selection from among the items on offer. Smart power with a liberal, friendly appearance, power that stimulates and seduces, is more compelling than power that imposes, threatens, and decrees. Its signal and seal is the like button. Now, people subjugate themselves to domination by consuming and communicating, and they click like all the while. Neoliberalism is the capitalism of like. It is fundamentally different from 19th century capitalism, which operated by means of disciplinary constraints and prohibitions. Smart power reads and appraises our conscious and unconscious thoughts. It places its stock in voluntary self-organization and self-optimization. As such, it has no need to overcome resistance. Mastery of this sort requires no great expenditure of energy or violence. It simply happens. The capitalism of like should come with a warning label. Protect me from what I want. Chapter 3, The Mole and the Snake. I say, stop here. I need food. Anything we want to say?
I mean, this kind of elucidates a lot of the shit we've already talked about in CMT.
It really does.
And in the PMC.
For real.
They are the new, the PMC are the new rulers over these little kingdoms where we are always constantly producing and reproducing ourselves. Silence is violence. There's no more proletariat. All these things. It's all right there, and it is very succinct.
Which just makes him, like, reading him, it feels like all I'm doing is hearing myself writing better than I can write, which makes me sad and angry. And it makes it hard to actually elaborate on it or actually do an exegesis, because it's like hearing my own common sense read back at me. And then I go like, okay, well, fuck, are we just working inside of Byung Chul Han's head right now more than we actually realize? Right. But then I actually say, no, he doesn't say anything about the PMC, and he's completely missed the 20th century development of that as a function that lays the bedrock forward for neo-feudalism. So he's really not making that connection clear. He's missing the historical development of it as a reaction against working class successes and capitalist fears in the early 20th century. And so, I mean, he's never making that explicit, whether he understands it or not. And I think, like, I don't know, I think we can kind of make that contribution. And then we also get to kind of bring this all together in our own ways with time energy theory into the critical media theory cohort. But really, though, Byung Chul Han is like this thinker of our moment that people like Mikey haven't even read yet. And it's like, I don't know, have you ever read him before?
I've read bits and pieces. Like, I've never actually sat down to read him. I've read and listened to bits and pieces, but never actually sitting and reading.
Yeah, so this is special to me then, that we're doing this right now, that we're doing this here. We're gonna go eat some chili. I'm really excited about that because it's cold, and we've got a precious little boy, and he doesn't know what to do because he's a cat, and he doesn't know about he doesn't know about this stuff. He's just like, what the fuck, man? What are we doing out here? He knows that there is no outside. He knows we're fucked. Like, his whole attitude right now is very like, he's just like, well, this is where I am, and there's no going away from here. Dave is literally the warmest thing for me. And he's like, there's no outside. I can only stay in Dave's jacket. Because before this, he was over there in his playpen, and it got full of water over time. And so he wasn't shivering when we got to him because it wasn't that bad yet, but it was getting there. He was wet and clearly like, what can I do? So as soon as I put him inside my jacket, he was like, okay, this is much better. But yeah, now I'm going to hand Ryan Gosling to Nance. Nance, you can put him in your jacket, and then I'm going to make some chili. And I'm fucking stoked. All right. And I didn't mean to be advertising for Kellogg's. Actually, Kellogg is probably one of the most responsible brands in the country for giving children diabetes. And so, fuck you, Kellogg's. Stupid pieces of shit. I did not mean to advertise you guys.
Also, the dude who started it was a religious fanatic who believed that jacking off was bad. And he thought Frosted Flakes Corn Flakes would end masturbation.
These guys do not have clarity.
No,
because they're all no fap.
Yeah, they didn't have the post nut clarity.
They didn't have. Dude, people without post nut clarity are like subjects of postmodernism, but they can't think beyond it.
They're trapped in the matrix, man. That semen retention shit is responsible for reactionary violence.
You had good food? We all just had good food. So did Ryan. These are our logs. They finally burned in half. So we've got quite the thing going here.
And Ranger Matthew is okay with this.
Yeah.
Right, Matthew or Michael?
I don't know. All the names are changed to not be real people anyway.
Oh yeah, Ranger Mitchell is what it was.
Yeah, that's right.
And if they stay watching.
We're back.
Yo, yo, yo.
We're wondering who's still watching this. Let us know if you watch this far. So, it's still raining. The fire is going. It's just not blazing, but those are smoldering logs. I think we're gonna be good. And we've got our boyo. Anne is still doing errands. She said if she's not back by midnight, we'll know there's a problem. So we've got time before there's a problem. It's not that late actually. It just looks dark. So the mole and the snake is chapter 3. Disciplinary society consists of settings and institutions of confinement. The family, schools, prisons, barracks, hospitals, and factories all represent disciplinary spaces that confine. The disciplinary subject changes from one milieu of confinement to the next. In so doing, it moves within a closed system. The inhabitants of milieus of confinement can be ordered in space and time. The animal of disciplinary society is the mole. In his postscript on the societies of control, Deleuze diagnoses a general crisis affecting all milieus of confinement. Their closedness and rigidity pose a problem. They are no longer suited to post-industrial, immaterial, and networked forms of production. The latter push for more openness by breaking borders down. But the mole cannot bear such openness. Accordingly, the snake takes the mole's place. The snake is the animal of neoliberal control society, to which disciplinary society has yielded. In contrast to the mole, the snake does not move in closed spaces. Rather, it makes space by means of its own movement. The mole is a laborer. In contrast, the snake is an entrepreneur. The snake is the animal of the neoliberal regime. The mole moves through predetermined spaces. As such, it subordinates itself to spatial restrictions. The mole is a subjugated subject, but the snake is a project inasmuch as it creates space through the course it steers. The passage from the mole to the snake, from subject to project, does not amount to setting out for an entirely new way of life. Instead, it represents a mutation, indeed an intensification of capitalism, which remains one and the same. The mole's restricted movements impose limits on productivity. Even when it labors in disciplined fashion, it cannot exceed a certain level of productivity. The snake eliminates such limitations through new forms of movement. Accordingly, the capitalist system is switching from the role model to the snake model in order to generate more productivity.
According to Deleuze, the disciplinary regime organizes itself as a body. It is a biopolitical regime. The neoliberal regime, in contrast, seems like a soul. As such, psychopolitics is its form of government. It is constantly introducing an inexorable rivalry presented as healthy competition. Wonderful motivation. Motivation, projects, competition, optimization, and initiative represent features of the psychopolitical technology of domination that constitutes the neoliberal regime. Above all, the snake embodies the guilt and debts that the neoliberal regime employs as instruments of domination.
Chapter 4.
Biopolitics. Since the 17th century, Foucault claims, power has ceased to manifest itself as the godlike sovereign's capacity to deal death and instead taken the form of discipline. The power of sovereignty is the might of the sword. It threatens with death and exploits the privilege to seize hold of life in order to suppress it. In contrast, disciplinary power is not a power to deal death, but a power over life. Its function is no longer to kill, but to invest life through and through. Hereby, the old power of death yields to the careful administration of bodies and the calculated management of life. The transition from the power of sovereignty to disciplinary power followed from changes in forms of production, specifically the shift from agrarian to industrial production. As industrialization proceeded, it became necessary to discipline the body and fit it to machinic production. Instead of torturing the body, disciplinary power yokes it into a system of norms. Calculated coercion pervades each and every limb and comes to be inscribed even in the automatism of habits. The body is calibrated to be a production unit. A concerted orthopedy fashions shapeless dough into a machine. Disciplines are methods which make possible the meticulous control of the operations of the body, which assure the constant subjection of its forces and impose upon them a relation of docility-utility. Disciplinary power is normative power. It subjects the subject to a set of rules, norms, commandments, and prohibitions, and eliminates deviations and anomalies. Such negativity of training and drills is constitutive of disciplinary power. On this point, it approaches the power of sovereignty, which has its basis in the negativity of levying and conscription. Both sovereign power and disciplinary power pursue allo exploitation. They bring forth the obedience subject. Disciplinary technology also reaches beyond the physical realm into the mental sphere. After all, industry means hard work. Industrial school was another term for reform school. Bentham observed that his panopticon assures inmates moral improvement too. That said, disciplinary power does not focus on the psyche. The orthopedic technology of disciplinary power is too crude to penetrate into the deeper layers of the soul with its hidden wishes, needs, and desires, and take it over. Bentham's big brother only observes inmates from the outside. His panopticon is bound to the optical medium. It has no access to inner thoughts or needs. Disciplinary power discovered population as a productive and reproductive mass to be administrated carefully. Biopolitics is devoted to this task. Reproductive cycles, birth and death rates, levels of general health, and life expectancy provide the objects of regulation. Foucault explicitly discusses the biopolitics of the population. Biopolitics is the governmental technology of disciplinary power. However, this approach proves altogether unsuited to the neoliberal regime, which exploits the psyche above all. Biopolitics, which makes use of population statistics, has no access to the psychic realm. It can deliver no material for drawing up a psychogram of the population. Demography is not the same thing as psychography. It cannot tap into or disclose the psyche. On this score, statistics and big data lie worlds apart. Big data provides the means for establishing not just an individual but a collective psychogram, perhaps even the psychogram of the unconscious itself. As such, it may yet shine a light into the depths of the psyche and exploit the unconscious entirely.
You hear that?
Yeah.
Woo! There's a loud fucking crack of like a breaking log. So some bear is about to come fuck with us for sure.
I don't want to get eaten by a bear.
If a bear comes, we'll grab our burning logs and ward it off with burning logs. That'll definitely do the trick.
You ever heard of Cliometrics?
No.
I think it comes out of economists who are basically trying to do this psychopolitics shit, but they're calling it Cliometrics, and it's basically statistics and sociology being used to count and control.
Oh, it's based.
Yeah.
I think cybernetics is a part of that too, though.
Cybernetics is prior to Cliometrics, but yeah,
It's supposed to be a science of control.
yeah.
So Cliometrics goes with that.
Yeah, it comes out of like people, economists using cybernetics, and cybernetic theory. And there's also psychohistory in Foundation, that show I was telling you about that's based on the book series.
Yeah.
The main character, the protagonist, develops psychohistory, which is demographics, sociology, statistics, economics. It's just all this shit. But with it, he can actually predict the future, and it's pretty cool. And it's very...
Psychohistory is also a field. It also is a coinage of Lloyd DeMoss's for a field that he does, and it's different. It does not give you the ability to predict the future, but what it does is it reads history through the lens of, instead of like say wars and who won and who lost, it reads history as, okay, what were they doing to the children during this time, and how did that influence the adults that they became? And like, so he'll look at like Nazi Germany, and he goes, okay, what were these people like as children? And then he goes back to what they were like as children, and like the fact that they were being put on fucking, like it was normal for like Hitler's generation, when they were like babies, if they were crying too much, the parents would put them on like a baking sheet and put them in the oven until they stopped, and things, and like put them in with glass and needles and things to ward away demons. There was just a lot of weird shit. But basically, kids were fucked up.
Did he write about the tribes that eat babies?
Yeah, dude.
Yeah, okay. I remember that.
He's all on that shit, man. And he was really important for me realizing that the third worldist types who want to like noble savagize, you know, their subject, it's he's good for destroying that, you know. But he's too Jungian for my taste. For reasons like, I mean, he sees a flag. He like, at one point he's analyzing a flag and talking about how, oh, see, it's red, and that makes you think of the womb. And he does like this. Yeah, dude. It's like, stop, dude. Yeah. Just stay on the history stuff. You're doing good over there. Foucault's Dilemma. Chapter 5, Foucault's Dilemma. After Discipline and Punish, Foucault recognized that disciplinary society did not reflect the times in every respect. In the late 1970s, he devoted his attention to neoliberal forms of government. However, the problem with his analyses is that he stuck to the concepts of population and biopolitics. Quote, it seems to me that only when we know what this governmental regime called liberalism was, will we be able to grasp what biopolitics is, end quote. Yet in the course of this same series of lectures, he mentions neither biopolitics nor population again. At this juncture, Foucault evidently did not appreciate that biopolitics and population, which represent genuine categories of disciplinary society, are unsuited to describing the neoliberal regime. Consequently, he failed to do what the circumstances actually called for, to make the turn to psychopolitics. The 1978 to 1979 lectures do not undertake the analysis of neoliberal biopolitics. Even though he did not recognize the real problem, Foucault offered self-critical remarks. Quote, I would like to assure you that, in spite of everything, I really did intend to talk about biopolitics, and then things being what they are, I have ended up talking at length, and maybe for too long, about neoliberalism. In the introduction to Homo Sacer, Giorgio Agamben speculates that Foucault's death kept him from showing how he would have developed the concept and study of biopolitics. But counter to such guesswork, if Foucault's early death kept him from anything, it deprived him of the chance to reevaluate his idea of biopolitics and abandon it in order to investigate neoliberal psychopolitics. Agamben's analysis of domination also fails to approach the technologies of power in the neoliberal regime in meaningful fashion. The homines sacri of today have not been shut out of the system. They have been shut into the system.
Foucault explicitly ties biopolitics to capitalism's disciplinary form, which socializes the body in its productive capacity. For capitalist society, it is biopolitics, the biological, the somatic, the corporal, that matters more than anything else. In other words, biopolitics fundamentally concerns the biological and the physical. All in all, it constitutes a politics of the body in the fullest sense. But neoliberalism, a further development, indeed a mutated form of capitalism, is not primarily concerned with the biological, the somatic, the corporal. It has discovered the psyche as a productive force. This psychic turn, that is the turn to psychopolitics. Damn, dude.
Hey!
This shit's gonna blow up.
Fuck yeah.
In other words, biopolitics fundamentally concern, all in all, it constitutes a politics of the body in the fullest sense. Blah, 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 blah. It has discovered the psyche as a productive force. This psychic turn, that is, the turn to psychopolitics, also connects with the mode of operation of contemporary capitalism. Now, Immaterial and non-physical forms of production are what determine the course of capitalism. What gets produced are not material objects, but immaterial ones. For instance, information and programs. The body no longer represents a central force of production, as it formerly did in biopolitical disciplinary society. Now, productivity is not to be enhanced by overcoming physical resistance so much as by optimizing psychic or mental processes. Psychological discipline has given way to mental optimization, and neuroenhancement differs from the disciplinary techniques of psychiatry fundamentally. Today, the body is being released from the immediate process of production and turning into the object of optimization, whether along aesthetic lines or in terms of health technology. Accordingly, orthopedic intervention is yielding to aesthetic intervention. Foucault's docile body has no place in this production process. Cosmetic surgery and fitness studios are taking the place of disciplinary orthopedics. That said, physical optimization means more than aesthetic practice alone. Sexiness and fitness represent new economic resources to be increased, marketed, and exploited. Bernard Stiegler has rightly observed...
Dude, he's gonna bring in some Stiegler?
Yeah.
God damn.
Bernard Stiegler has rightly observed that Foucault's concept of biopower is not suited to the times. Foucault's biopower, which he himself describes and so powerfully, historically...
Ryan is snoring.
Oh.
I heard him go... Oh. You hear that? Yeah, that's fucking precious.
Are you snoring, buddy? Can you see Ryan?
Oh, he is, yeah. Oh my god. Okay.
Foucault's biopower, which he himself describes, and so powerfully, historically and geographically by localizing it in Europe, is no longer the force behind our age. According to Stiegler, biopower has been replaced by psychotechnological psychopower. Above all, he has in mind the programming industry, which is telecratic. By reducing us to impulsive creatures of consumption, it induces mass regression. Such psychotechnics contrasts with the technology of writing and reading. For Stiegler, the medium of literacy means enlightenment. Accordingly, he invokes Kant. Kant's thought of maturity as humanity's sovereignty is based on the apparatus of reading and writing. However, Stiegler's overemphasis on television is problematic. For him, it represents the psychotechnical apparatus tout court. Now, at the beginning of the 21st century, cell phones and many other devices catalyze synaptic circuitry. Yet it is principally television that governs the influx of information. In fact, the opposition between literacy and television affords a superannuated scheme of cultural critique, which fails to do justice to the digital revolution. Strangely, Stiegler hardly examines truly digital technology, such as the internet and social media, which prove fundamentally different from the mass media of the past. What is more, he barely pays attention to the panoptic structure of digital networks. As a result, he completely misses the workings of neoliberal psychopolitics, which employs digital technology on a massive scale.
God damn. I've always been interested in Stiegler, but I tried to read him a couple times and fell off really quick. I don't know why. In the early 1980s, Foucault turned to technologies of the self. The term refers to intentional and voluntary actions by which men not only set themselves rules of conduct, I can get that blazing again next time I hand it off to you, but also seek to transform themselves, to change themselves in their singular being, and to make their life into an oeuvre that carries certain aesthetic values and meets certain stylistic criteria. Foucault developed historically situated ethics of the self, and he did so in a context largely detached from technologies and techniques of power and domination. Consequently, it is often assumed that his ethics of the self stands in opposition to power and domination. Indeed, Foucault himself pointed out the shift he was making from technologies of power to technologies of the self. Perhaps I've insisted too much on the technology of domination and power. I am more and more interested in the interaction between oneself and others and the technologies of individual domination, the history of how an individual acts upon himself in the technology of the self. In fact, the blind spot in Foucault's analysis is the technology of power under the neoliberal regime. Foucault did not see that the neoliberal regime utterly claims the technology of the self for its own purposes. Perpetual self-optimization as the exemplary neoliberal technology of the self represents nothing so much as a highly efficient mode of domination and exploitation. As an entrepreneur of himself, the neoliberal achievement subject engages in auto-exploitation willingly and even passionately. It's what we're doing right now. Except that, I don't know. I think that we're not alienated from this work. This becomes us.
Yeah.
That's the difference.
We're producing ourselves rather than consuming ourselves.
The self as a work of art amounts to a beautiful but deceptive illusion that the neoliberal regime maintains in order to exhaust its resources entirely. Under neoliberalism, the technology of power takes on a subtle form. It does not lay hold of individuals directly. Instead, it ensures that individuals act on themselves so that power relations are interiorized and then interpreted as freedom. Self-optimization and submission, freedom and exploitation, fall into one. Such engineering of freedom and exploitation, which occurs in order to affect self-exploitation, is what escaped Foucault. Oh, goddamn. Hold on.
Yeah, dude.
Well, that's a mosquito hawk. It kills mosquitoes.
Oh, okay.
But that's a mosquito.
Get these motherfuckers,
He kills
dude.
them.
Get them.
You thought that was a mosquito?
Yeah, dude.
That's terrifying.
I know. It's a big ass mosquito.
It's a mosquito hawk. They do look like mosquitoes, and they supposedly kill mosquitoes, but they definitely don't touch humans.
Dude, get those motherfuckers. Let me get some smoke in the
Yeah,
tent.
you have a job, bro.
Yeah.
All right. Here, I'm going to let you keep reading as I get this figured out.
You want some light?
No, I'm good.
Chapter 6, Healing as Killing. Neoliberal psychopolitics is always coming up with more refined forms of exploitation. Countless self-management workshops, motivational retreats, and seminars on personality or mental training promise boundless self-optimization and heightened efficiency. They are steered by neoliberal techniques of domination, which aim to capitalize not just on working time, but on the person, him or herself. All the attention the individual commands and, indeed, his or her very life. Neoliberalism has discovered integral human being as the object of exploitation. The neoliberal imperative of self-optimization serves only to promote perfect functioning within the system. Inhibitions, points of weakness, and mistakes are to be therapeutically eliminated in order to enhance efficiency and performance. In turn, everything is made comparable and measurable and subjected to the logic of the market.
Therapism.
Yeah. It is not concern for the good life that drives self-optimization. Rather, self-optimization follows from systemic constraints, from the logic of quantifying success on the market. The age of sovereignty was the age of levying and conscription, the expropriation and appropriation of goods and services. The power of sovereignty expressed itself as the right to seize and dispose at will. In contrast, disciplinary society banks on production. It is the age of active and industrial added value. That said, the time for creating new value, which is real, is over and done. Indeed, under the financial capitalism of our day, value is being destroyed at the root, eradicated. The neoliberal regime is in the course of inaugurating the age of exhaustion. Today, the psyche itself is being exploited. Accordingly, psychic maladies such as depression and burnout define our times. In contemporary American self-help literature, the magic word is healing. The term refers to self-optimization that is supposed to therapeutically eliminate any and all functional weakness or mental obstacle in the name of efficiency and performance. Yet perpetual self-optimization, which coincides point for point with the optimization of the system, is proving destructive. It is leading to mental collapse. Self-optimization, it turns out, amounts to total self-exploitation. The neoliberal ideology of self-optimization displays religious, indeed fanatical traits. It entails a new form of subjectivation, endlessly working at self-improvement resembles the self-examination and self-monitoring of Protestantism, which represents a technology of subjectivization and domination in its own right. Now, instead of searching out sins, one hunts down negative thoughts.
Yes.
Fuck yeah. The ego grapples...
Dude, Mikey's having us read The Happiness Industry. Shut the... Mikey, you need to read this.
Yeah. Yeah. Don't get me wrong, the happiness industry is good, but I feel like this is a lot...
It's just not as based in all the thinkers, you know?
This goes a lot deeper.
That's like a popular sociology work versus, I don't know, one of our only living real thinkers.
Right.
Doing the same thing, but base.
No.
Oh, look at the boy, he's back.
Now, instead of searching out sins, one hunts down negative thoughts. The ego grapples with itself as an enemy. Today, even fundamentalist preachers act like managers and motivational trainers, proclaiming the new gospel of limitless achievement and optimization.
Where are we at?
Final paragraph.
It is impossible to subordinate human personhood to the dictates of positivity entirely. Without negativity, life degrades into something dead. What's he doing?
Being cute.
Just being cute?
He just stretched his arm out.
Oh. Anything he does with his hands is like the cutest thing ever. Indeed, negativity is what keeps life alive. Pain is constitutive for experience. Erfahrung. By the way, throughout this book, he uses a lot of original German words in parentheses that we haven't been reading. So you just have to read it yourself eventually. Life that consists wholly of positive emotions and the sensation of flow is not human at all. The human soul owes its defining tautness and depth precisely to negativity. That tension of the soul in unhappiness, which cultivates its, this is a quote, that tension of the soul in unhappiness, which cultivates its strength, is its inventiveness and courage in enduring, persevering, interpreting, and exploiting suffering, and whatever has been granted to it of profundity, secret, mask, spirit, cunning, greatness. Was it not granted through suffering, through the discipline of great suffering? Is this Foucault? The imperative of boundless optimization even manages to exploit pain. Thus, the famous motivational speaker, Tony Robbins, has written, when you set a goal, you've committed to CANI, C-A-N-I, constant, never-ending improvement. You've acknowledged the need that all human beings have for constant, never-ending improvement. There is a power in the pressure of dissatisfaction, in the tension of temporary discomfort. This is the kind of pain you want in your life. I love that he just used Tony Robbins. I don't remember any of this from the time I listened to this book. My God. Now the only pain that is tolerated is pain that can be exploited for the purposes of optimization. But the violence of positivity is just as destructive as the violence of negativity. Neoliberal psychopolitics, with the consciousness industry it promotes, is destroying the human soul, which is anything but a machine of positivity. Positive machine, German word. The neoliberal subject is running aground on the imperative of self-optimization. That is, on the compulsion always to achieve more and more. Healing, it turns out, means killing.
Fucking bass, dude. By the way, Tony Robbins, that's funny, because the other day, what happened?
Wait, what happened?
You remember that conversation with that guy?
Which guy? Fuck.
That's not a public conversation.
Who is talking about Tony?
It's not a public conversation. Oh, you licked my finger. You licked my finger.
Chapter 7. Shock.
Naomi Klein's shock doctrine, which smacks of conspiracy, calls the first of its two main characters Dr. Shock. This is the name given to Montreal psychiatrist Dr. Ewan Cameron, who believed that administering electric shocks could destroy bad elements within the brain, erase them, and enable a new personality to be constructed starting from a clean slate. By means of electroshock, Cameron plunged his patients into a state of chaos that was supposed to provide the basis for their rebirth as healthy, model citizens. In other words, he understood the acts of destruction he performed as a kind of creation. The psyche was subjected to a violent debranding and rebranding. It was to be newly formatted and rewritten, as it were. Cameron set up a panopticon with isolation chambers, where he conducted human experiments of the utmost cruelty. The rooms were like torture chambers. First, over the course of a month, patients were administered powerful electroshocks. This served to expunge their memories. In the process, they were also given mind-altering drugs. Their hands and arms were stuck in cardboard tubes in order to keep them from touching their bodies, i.e., to prevent them from having any encounter with their own self-image.
Fuck.
Moreover, Cameron deprived his patients of sensory impressions by inducing extended sleep by pharmaceutical means. They were brought out of this state only to eat and perform bodily functions. Such conditions could last for up to 30 days. Staff were instructed to prohibit patients from speaking. Cameron's hospital was a panopticon far crueler than Bentham's. Oh my God. The CIA funded Cameron's research, which took place at the height of the Cold War. A fervent anti-communist, Cameron thought his experiments were part of the battle. He likened his patients to communist prisoners of war undergoing interrogation. Indeed, his practices resembled interrogation techniques. They occurred in conjunction with brainwashing and the ideological struggles of the Cold War. The Manichaean opposition between good and evil lay at their foundation. Evil would be wiped away, eradicated, and replaced by good. Likewise, the negativity of immunological defense against the other or the enemy defined Cameron's practices. As Dr. Shock, Cameron represents a phenomenon of the immunological age. The immunological intervention of shock therapy takes aim at the other, the alien, the enemy. It is meant to disarm the adversary, so his soul may be inscribed with a different ideology, another narrative. Klein's other main character, the second Dr. Shock, is Milton Friedman, the theologian of the neoliberal market. Klein draws parallels between the two men. For Friedman, the state of shock that follows a catastrophe offers the opportunity, indeed the ideal moment, for society to be reshaped. Accordingly, the neoliberal regime should operate by means of shock, which wipes the psyche clean and empties it out. When it has been rendered defenseless, the mind readily accepts radical reprogramming. When people are still paralyzed and traumatized by disaster, they can become the objects of neoliberal conditioning. Friedman's mission, like Cameron's, rested on a dream of reaching back to a state of natural health, when all was in balance, before human interferences created distorting patterns. Where Cameron dreamed of returning the human mind to that pristine state, Friedman dreamed of depatterning societies, of returning them to a state of pure capitalism, cleansed of all interruptions, government regulations, trade barriers, and entrenched interests. Also, like Cameron, Friedman believed that when the economy is highly distorted, the only way to reach that prelapsarian state was to deliberately inflict painful shocks. Only bitter medicine could clear those distortions and bad patterns out of the way. But Klein's theory of shock blinds her to the actual workings of neoliberal psychopolitics. Shock therapy is a genuinely disciplinary technique. Violent psychiatric interventions of this kind are employed in disciplinary society alone. They number among the biopolitical measures of coercion. As psychodisciplines, they are orthopedic in nature. In contrast, the neoliberal technology of power does not exercise disciplinary coercion. Electroshock's mode of operation differs fundamentally from that of neoliberal psychopolitics. Electroshock owes its efficacy to paralyzing and annihilating the contents of the psyche. Its essential trait is negativity. In contrast, neoliberal psychopolitics is dominated by positivity. Instead of working with negative threats, it works with positive stimuli. Instead of administering bitter medicine, it enlists liking. It flatters the psyche instead of shaking it and paralyzing it with shocks. Neoliberal psychopolitics seduces the soul. It preempts it in lieu of opposing it. It carefully protocols desires, needs, and wishes instead of depatterning them. By means of calculated prognoses, it anticipates actions and acts ahead of them instead of canceling them out. Neoliberal psychopolitics is smart politics. It seeks to please and fulfill, not to repress.
Hold on one sec. And...
All right, we're going.
Chapter 8, Friendly Big Brother. Newspeak is the name of the ideal language in George Orwell's surveillance state. It is meant to supplant old speak entirely. Newspeak has only one goal, to restrict room for thinking freely. Every year, words decrease in number, and the space for conscious thought diminishes. Syme, a friend in 1984's hero Winston, raves about the beauty of destroying words. Thought crimes, he enthuses, will be made impossible when the words necessary for them are struck from the lexicon. That's like Fahrenheit 451.
Yeah, very much.
In the process, the notion of freedom will be abolished too. On this score, Orwell's surveillance state differs fundamentally from the world of digital panopticon, which uses freedom to excess. Today's society of information is not characterized by destroying words, but by multiplying them without end. So, in the same way that McGowan, well, actually, no, it is different than how McGowan's using freedom. So, there's things that both McGowan and Byung Chul, I think, don't talk about when talking about freedom and limitation versus unlimitedness as a form of not freedom. Mm-hmm. Like, they both kind of get at this in their own ways. And I think that the danger of Byung Chul as a sort of post-left figure doing this, it's not a real danger because I don't think he's dangerous.
Right.
But I just think that the issue is like it's easy for someone to read this and kind of go, "Yeah, fuck freedom." See, it was a ruse all along.
Right.
When we've never had substantial freedom.
Right.
And he never taught. Byung Chul doesn't talk about substantial freedom, and so. Today's society of information is not characterized by destroying words, but by multiplying them without end. It's not true. People are less literate than they've ever been. They have fewer words than they've ever had. And the words that they do have, they don't understand their roots. They don't understand their connotation versus denotation. They don't have hermeneutic or deconstructive abilities when applying or taking on words. And so we're not freer. This is not freedom, and what he thinks is as a profusion of words and information is like, yeah, but it's structurally stultified populations that he's talking about.
Yeah, I think I don't. He doesn't make a distinction between data and information, which is something I've recently been trying to figure out how to differentiate data from information. The way he's using information is very much the way I use data.
The way he's using information is the way you use data.
Right. And there is a distinction between data and information. This infinite proliferation of information, as he's calling it, is just data, demographic points, discrete descriptors,
Yeah.
And also this infinity of words. We do have an infinity of words. Everyone creates their own new words, and it's just recycling old words. It's modifying and changing new words, and it's reassigning meanings to old words. So there is this ideology of the infinity of words that does cover up the fact that we're losing words. We are very much losing words, but people believe that words are multiplying and words are growing. And when in reality, so similarly to how I brought up the hypercategorization with Todd McGowan as a form of artificial limiting, I think he's doing the same thing. He's just not talking about it in the way we've been talking about it. So I see what he's doing.
But what kind of freedom does he advocate for?
He's not advocating for a freedom. He's describing our non-freedom.
Yeah, and he just leaves it at that. And
Yeah.
I think that's okay.
Yeah.
But the danger, which is not really a danger, is in reading this and just going, oh, so Eastern Orthodox Dugan bro shit
Doing the
is
Garvin thing.
is the necessary next step because we're over that liberal freedom thing.
Yeah,
Right.
that'd be just doing the Yarvin thing at that point.
Yeah. And I think, I don't know, I don't actually know this, but I just get this sense that, actually, no, I do know this. Yeah, Orthodox bros who are into Dugan do like Han, and it's fucked because I consider them, I even consider Dugan beyond, above and beyond them. Because of the way, because they're Americans, and the way they approach these thinkers fails.
Yeah.
But Han especially. Anyway, okay.
Yeah.
The spirit of the Cold War and the negativity of the enmity dominate Orwell's novel. The country it describes is in a state of permanent war. Julia, Winston's love interest, speculates that the bombs raining down on London every day have been launched by Big Brother and the party in order to maintain fear and terror in the populace. The enemy of the people is called Emmanuel Goldstein. He commands a network of underground conspirators seeking to overthrow the government. Big Brother is at ideological war with Goldstein. 2 minutes of hate broadcast daily on the telescreen takes aim at Goldstein. In the Ministry of Truth, in fact, a Ministry of Lies, the past is revised and fitted to ideology. Orwell's surveillance state employs the psychotechnical methods of brainwashing, electroshock, sleep deprivation, solitary confinement, drugs, and physical torture. The Ministry of Plenty, Newspeak, Mini Plenty, sees to it that consumer goods are always lacking, so that an artificial state of need may be maintained. Orwell's surveillance state, with its telescreens and torture chambers, is fundamentally different from today's digital panopticon, with its internet, smartphones, and Google Glass. I still want to see these things, man. They
Google
never really
Glass?
took off, yeah.
Well, yeah, they never did a public release. There was always like a developer.
I wanted it, man. I
Yeah.
wanted to be able to be working while I listened to robot readers, and
Yeah.
I wanted to be able to see the words as I worked.
Dude, those sunglasses I have do that.
I need those at fucking Amazon.
I know.
You have to send those to me. Let me,
No,
let me
dude.
trial run them for a little bit. In the digital panopticon, the illusion of limitless freedom and communication predominates. Here, there is no torture, just tweets and posts. No, those are torture. Nor is there a mysterious ministry of truth. Transparency and information have taken the place of truth. The new conception of power does not involve controlling the past, but steering the future psychopolitically. The neoliberal technology of power does not prohibit, protect, or repress. Instead, it prospects, permits, and projects. Consumption is not held in check, but maximized. No production of scarcity occurs. Instead, surplus is generated. Indeed, a superabundance of positivity. Everyone is encouraged to communicate and consume. The principle of negativity, which still defined Orwell's state, has yielded to the principle of positivity. Needs are not repressed, but stimulated. Confession obtained by force has been replaced by voluntary disclosure. Smartphones have been substituted for torture chambers. Big Brother now wears a friendly face. His friendliness is what makes surveillance so efficient. Torture chambers still exist, though, man.
This is true.
Guantanamo is still operating as we speak.
Yeah.
This is the whole thing, is like the disciplinary society is still there.
Yeah.
And it's especially there if you're working in construction on probation with the actual state, because you were in a real penitentiary.
Yep.
Where they, guess what? They don't give a fuck about your opinion while you're in there. They also don't give a fuck about your self-disclosure while you're in there.
All this shit, though, is at the level of ideology. So people, it doesn't matter.
That's okay. Mm-hmm.
Like, people believe in this.
Yeah, that's right.
And
he's just outlining the situation of what people believe.
Yeah,
also, people perform it, people function in it, and every person in prison is trying to figure out what their memoir is going to be, because they got to figure out their memoir. They can sell themselves back to the PMC because they're fucked if they can't. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. Bentham's Big Brother was invisible, but he was everywhere in prisoners' minds. Inmates interiorized him. In contrast, the inhabitants of today's digital panopticon never really feel that they are being watched or threatened. There's this weird bug on the reader. Consequently, surveillance state is an imprecise name for describing the digital panopticon. Here everyone feels free. Mm-hmm. However, precisely this feeling of freedom, which is nowhere to be found in Orwell's state, is now the problem. The digital panopticon thrives on its occupants' voluntary self-exposure. Self-exploitation and self-illumination follow the same logic. In either case, freedom is exploited. The digital panopticon lacks a big brother wresting information from us against our will. Instead, we lay ourselves bare voluntarily. The advertisement that Apple aired during the 1984 Super Bowl has become the stuff of legend. In it, the company presented itself as a force of liberation, which would counter the Orwellian surveillance state. In lockstep, listless workers, evidently without a will of their own, march into a vast hall and listen to Big Brother's fanatical declamations on the telescreen. Then the ad shows a woman rushing into the assembly hall, the thought police in hot pursuit. Bearing a sledgehammer before her heaving breast, she dashes forward. Full of resolve, she runs straight up to Big Brother and throws the sledgehammer at the telescreen with all the force she can muster. It explodes in a dazzling burst of light. The assembled workers promptly awaken from their torpor. A voice declares, on January 24th, Apple Computer will introduce Macintosh, and you'll see why 1984 won't be like 1984. But despite Apple's message, 1984 did not signal the end of the surveillance state so much as the inception of a new kind of control society, one whose operations surpass the Orwellian state by leaps and bounds. Now communication and control have become one, without remainder. Now everyone is his or her own panopticon.
Chapter 9, Emotional Capitalism. Today, talk of feeling and emotion has grown inflationary. Many academic disciplines are researching emotion. All of a sudden, the human being no longer counts as an animal rationale. Instead, man is a creature of sentiment. That said, hardly anyone bothers to ask where this sudden interest in emotions came from. Scientific emotion researchers are clearly not reflecting much on their own activities. Thus, they have failed to remark that the emotional boom stems from an economic process above all. Worse still, utter conceptual confusion prevails. Emotion, feeling, and affect seem interchangeable for many researchers. Yet feeling and emotion are not identical. We speak, for instance, of a feeling for language, athletics, or other people. Linguistic aptitude, a knack for sports, and compassion. One may have a feel for language or feel for others, but no one has an emotion for language or experiences calm emotion. There is no such thing as language affect or calm affect either. Mourning is a feeling too, but it sounds strange to speak of an affect of mourning or an emotion of mourning. Affect and emotion refer to strictly subjective matters, whereas feeling refers to something objective. Feeling can be recounted. It has narrative length or breadth. Neither affect nor emotion admits an account. The crisis of feelings that can be observed in contemporary theater also represents a crisis of giving account. Today, the narrative theater of feelings is yielding to a clamorous theater of affects. Because narrative is lacking, an affective mask gets piled onto the stage, but in contrast to feeling, affect does not open up space. Instead, it steers a linear path in order to discharge, to unload itself. The digital medium is an affect medium too. Digital communication fosters the immediate release of affect, catharsis. Simply on the basis of its temporality, digital communication conveys affect more than it transmits feeling. Shitstorms are streams of affect. They represent exemplary phenomena of digital communication. Feelings are constitutive. For instance, we say, I have a feeling that. In contrast, it is impossible to say, I have an affect or an emotion that. Emotions are not constitutive, but performative. They refer to actions and deeds. Furthermore, they are intentional and goal-oriented. Feelings, on the other hand, do not necessarily display an intentional structure. Often, the feeling of anxiety has no concrete object. That is what makes anxiety different from fear, which has an intentional structure. Nor is it a feel, that is a sense, for language, intentional. Its non-intentionality is what distinguishes it from linguistic expression, which, because it expresses, is emotive, a feeling of cosmic oneness, an oceanic sense of the world, that does not focus on anything or anyone in particular, is also possible. Neither emotions nor affects achieve the dimensions that characterize feelings. Emotions and affects are expressions of subjectivity. Feelings also have a different temporality than emotions. They admit duration. Emotions prove significantly more fleeting and short-lived than feelings. Likewise, affect is often limited to a single moment. In contrast to feelings, emotions do not represent a state. The emotion does not stand. There is no emotion of rest. A feeling of calm is easy to conceive. In contrast, the expression emotional state has a paradoxical ring. Emotions are dynamic, situative, and performative. Emotional capitalism exploits precisely these qualities. Feelings, in contrast, cannot be readily exploited inasmuch as they have no performativity. Finally, affects are not performative so much as eruptive. They lack performative directionality. Atmosphere, or mood, differs from both feeling and emotion. It possesses even more objectivity than feeling. Objectively, a space or room can harbor any given atmosphere. An atmosphere or mood expresses a way it is. In contrast, emotions derive from deviations from the way it is. For instance, a place may diffuse a friendly mood. This atmosphere is something wholly objective, but there is no such thing as a friendly emotion or a friendly affect. Atmosphere, mood, is neither intentional nor performative. It is the element where one happens to find oneself. It represents a state of being or state of mind. As such, atmosphere is static and constellative, whereas emotion is dynamic and performative. Where distinguishes a state, a disposition, in contrast, whither, a direction, defines emotion. Feeling, in turn, is a matter of wherefore, why. Eva Illou's Cold Intimacies, The Making of Emotional Capitalism, offers no answer to the question of why it is that feelings experience a boom under conditions of capitalism, in particular. What is more, the book equates feelings and emotions without drawing any conceptual distinction at all. Nor is it very useful to locate the question of feelings under capitalism at its inaugural stages. Weber's Protestant ethic contains at its core a thesis about the role of emotions in economic action, for it is the anxiety provoked by an inscrutable divinity which is at the heart of the capitalist entrepreneur's frantic activity. It is mistaken to understand anxiety in terms of emotion. Anxiety is a feeling. Its corresponding temporality proves incompatible with affect. Affect is not a constant state. As such, it lacks the constancy that defines feeling. It is the constant feeling of anxiety that would entail frantic entrepreneurial activity. But what Weber analyzes is the ascetic capitalism of accumulation, which obeys rational logic more than it follows emotional logic. Accordingly, capitalism of this sort does not feed into consumer capitalism, which derives its profits from emotions. Moreover, consumer capitalism operates through the selling and consumption of meanings and emotions. It is not use value, but emotive or cultic value that plays a constitutive role in the economy of consumption. By the same token, Illouz fails to account for the fact that emotion comes to possess value for capitalism only when a switch to immaterial production occurs. Emotions have become a means of production only in our own times.
Oh my God. Anna's back.
I want to finish this chapter and then... Illouz also contends that the core of Durkheimian sociology, solidarity, represents a bundle of emotions, binding social actors to the central symbols of the society they inhabit. Summing up her argument, she declares, unbeknown to them, canonical sociological accounts of modernity contain, if not full-fledged theory of emotions, at least numerous references to them. Anxiety, love, competitiveness, indifference, and guilt are all present in most historical and sociological accounts of the ruptures which have led to the modern era.
Here, hold this for a sec. We'll resume.
All of these references to various sociological theories of emotion do nothing at all to explain the boom of emotion today. This corresponds to Illouz's neglect of conceptual distinctions between feeling, emotion, and affect. After all, indifference and guilt are neither affects nor emotions. It is only meaningful to speak of the feeling of guilt. Clearly, Illouz has failed to notice that the boom of emotion in our times ultimately derives from neoliberalism.
How is Illouz being spelled? Where is it?
Illouz. Illouz.
Huh.
Top of the second paragraph. Derives from neoliberalism. The neoliberal regime deploys emotions as resources in order to bring about heightened productivity and achievement. Starting at a certain level of production, rationality, which is the medium of disciplinary society, hits a limit. Henceforth, it is experienced as a constraint and inhibition. Suddenly, it seems rigid and inflexible. At this point, emotionality takes its place, which is attended by the feeling of liberty, the free unfolding of personality. After all, being free means giving free rein to emotions. Emotional capitalism banks on freedom. It hails emotion as the expression of unbridled subjectivity. Neoliberal technologies of power exploit this same subjectivity mercilessly. Rationality is defined by objectivity, generality, and steadiness. As such, it stands opposed to emotionality, which is subjective, situative, and volatile. Emotions arise, above all, when circumstances change and perception shifts. Rationality entails duration, consistency, and regularity. It prefers stable conditions. The neoliberal economy, increasingly dismantling continuity and progressively integrating instability in order to enhance productivity, is pushing the emotionalization of the productive process forward. Accelerated communication also promotes its emotionalization. Rationality is slower than emotionality. It has no speed, as it were. Thus, the pressure of acceleration now is leading to a dictatorship of emotion. Consumer capitalism enlists emotion in order to generate more desires and needs. Emotional design molds emotions and shapes emotional patterns for the sake of maximizing consumption. All in all, today we do not consume things so much as emotions.
He wants to be with you.
The former cannot be consumed without end, but the latter can. Emotions assume dimensions beyond the scope of use value. In so doing, they open up a field of consumption that is new and knows no limit. In disciplinary society, where one's task is to function, emotions represent disturbances. Accordingly, every effort is made to weed them out. Disciplinary society's concerted orthopedy seeks to make a shapeless mass of dough into an unfeeling machine. Machines function best when all emotions and feelings have been switched off. The boom in emotion today stems, not least of all, from a new immaterial mode of production in which communicative interaction plays an ever greater role. It calls not just for cognitive competence, but also for emotional competence. In this context, the integral person is installed in the very process of production. Daimler-Chrysler has publicly declared that since employees' behavior and their social and emotional skills play an increasing role in the evaluation of their work, this will be assessed on the basis of objectives achieved and the quality of outcomes. Now, sociality, communication, and even individual conduct are being exploited. Emotions provide raw material with which to optimize corporate communication. As Hewlett-Packard puts it, HP is a firm where one can breathe the spirit of communication, a strong spirit of interrelations, where people can communicate, where you go toward others. It is an affective relationship. A paradigm shift is taking place at the administrative level of companies. Emotions are being granted more and more significance. Rational management techniques are being replaced by emotional management. Managers today are leaving the principle of rational action behind. Increasingly, they resemble motivation coaches. Motivation connects with emotion. Positive emotions provide the ferment that makes motivation grow. Emotions are performative insofar as they call forth certain actions. As inclinations, they represent the energetic, the sensory, or even sensuous basis for action. Emotions are steered by the limbic system, which is also where the drives are seated. They form the pre-reflexive, half-conscious, physio-instinctual level of action that escapes full awareness. Neoliberal psychopolitics seizes on emotion in order to influence actions on this pre-reflexive level. By way of emotion, it manages to cut and operate deep inside. As such, emotion affords a highly efficient medium for psychopolitically steering the integral person, the person as a whole. Halfway through, actually a little more than halfway through.
Fucking based. So that we did half of Psychopolitics out here today. We also did the introduction to McLuhan and Baudrillard. Let's actually leave that open for a second because we can't really see us. So I guess in close, I have thoughts about looking forward to doing this again already. Like I'm happy we're getting through it on the first go, and then we're gonna digest it and come back to it again when we're because it's actually part of the CMT next month, I think. And so also one of the things I'm thinking about is our podcast, and also just like our exegeticals and our B-sides and the stuff that we're doing with we're planning for like the month of Twitch streaming, and all this stuff for the next year. And one of the things I'm really excited to do is to play these over stream, and us get to pause on them and actually add to them, and also run our commercials for all the other stuff that we're doing, and then make episodes out of that content. And at what point does it become our content and not just an audiobook? I think we're already there. I think I'm ready to go to the Supreme Court and argue that us doing this with Ryan in our jacket is enough value added. But beyond that, there's the fact that we are doing this in the rain, that we are doing this by a fire, that we had to go out in the woods and cut the fucking wood to like stay warm today, and that this is value added in the sense that we're not just reading the book in a fucking studio somewhere. We're modeling something, and I don't know. I think that even without any exegesis, that's value added. But I don't know. It's just a thought, because I'm like, well, we're not doing a lot of exegesis on this reading.
No, but we are. You're right about all the, like, we are modeling behavior that I think is pretty impressive. And not to toot our own horn, but
there you go.
Toot, bitch. Also, we are kind of drawing some connections, which I think it's not transformative, but it is very much a value add, because other people who will engage with this text, we'll
do so differently.
Yeah, like we're situating this text in a wider field that, again, it's in its nascency, but that's what it's all about, right? There's directionality here. We're not just sitting back, jerking off. We're not staying absorbed in the world of algorithms and influencership and all that.
And we're not just doing whatever books are currently trending. We're doing the books that the pattern to our selection, the order of our things is very much, it's directed by our research questions and the kinds of values that we hold to and the thinkers we're in conversation with, and all of this activity, all of this life activity, ultimately is a model of what you can do with your time energy. And if you're working a job right now where you don't have that, then we're hoping that this can become a sort of like way of hacking the system, and that it will also teach you to desire in a new way, teach you to desire in a post-based consumer way, and towards something more that you'll be able to do if you.
After this,
there we go, we're back.
So I figured out so we're playing around with post appellations and all that. I figured out a new post, and we are learning how to live post satisfaction, taking the idea of satisfaction as Byung Chul Han is kind of articulating this fulfillment or whatever in Psychopolitics. We have figured out how to live post satisfaction. And that is being content with the process itself rather than we are goal oriented, but we're not necessarily outcome oriented.
Right.
Because the outcome is the method. The outcome is the process. And,
exactly.
And we've accepted that.
That's what I was trying to say earlier when I was like, the end is becoming the process. Yeah.
I just think that was really cool. That just came to me right now.
That's based. Yeah, man, there's a lot of fucking threads we've been playing with all month. I mean, really all year, but really in the last month, like a lot of the stuff that we've been grinding on is kind of coming to fruition. And I'm stoked about it. And so if you're watching this in the future, if we're watching this in the future, the goal is that these are being replayed on probably the Twitch stream. That will also be, actually, you could just go to our GG like chat at Theory Underground. And that there will be like this ongoing conversation for months on end, where all of the exegeticals we've done and all of the exegeticals we're doing are getting mixed in with all of the language multilingualism, language activities that we're doing that are getting mixed in with all of this other workout-oriented, health-oriented activity stuff, because we want to live to be 120. We want to, or 300 for that matter. We want to live and not just be like old fucking shells of our former selves, but instead be like more interesting and more based than we ever were. What we see ourselves as right now is just little babies. Well, I'm sorry. I'm just a baby. I don't know shit.
I can pay in blocks.
Yeah, I can pay in blocks. But we're developing ourselves and we're setting ourselves up for success for the next decade and the next and the next. And if you're watching this, then you're doing the same thing. And if you are watching this, then you're one of the kinds of people who probably doesn't like, comment, and subscribe because you're busy and you're multitasking, or you are over this bullshit. You don't want to have to constantly feed the data or whatever. But if you don't do it, we'll die.
Yeah, man.
And we're trying to stay alive for a while here.
Yeah. No, yeah, dude. Like we're trying to get outside, trying to do new things, trying to come up with new ways to deal with the fact that we're just completely dissatisfied with what's on offer. And there is this element of like, we are relatively freed up from necessity for the time being. So hopefully we can like hammer this shit out and kind of figure out some of the shit. So by the time the rest of you dope ass motherfuckers who are watching this shit have free time, you can come join the fucking party.
Fuck yeah. Fuck yeah. And if you really want to join the party, then you got to read Underground Theory. You got to read Timenergy, Why You Have No Time or Energy. You got to engage with these works, because listening is only the beginning. Then there's going back over things, and then there's going back over things. And then eventually, if you keep doing that kind of work, there's going to be works that pour out of you.
Yeah, dude.
Because you are embodied. You have experiences that are unique. You have perspectives that are unique. And you're going to bring something new to the discourse, but it's not going to be worth anything, and your voice won't be shit if it's not based in dialogue with others. And so the thinkers we're into, the books that we've actually put out, the people that we're in dialogue with, it's all part of what we're hoping will go beyond a scene and become a part of an actual intellectual milieu. And so if you're going to be a part of that, then we'll be happy to have you. Make sure to get the app at the Android and or Apple stores for Theory Underground. Make sure to get those books. Make sure to play this stuff in the background while you're doing other things. You don't have to pay attention. You just have to reorient your circumspection itself, so that when you actually do pull up an object of concern or like direct your focus towards something, then this circumspection is going to prove useful. And it's about rewilding, orienting, and basing your circumspective concern in something that's got this thousands of years lineage of trying to figure shit out and use the master's tools to not just understand our current situation, but see beyond it and actually not just survive, but become human.
Yeah. Fuck yeah.
Take care. What's up, everybody? We're back. We're back to finish out Psychopolitics. And Anne's making some potatoes over there. I'll have to go cook some sausage in a minute, but I'm going to start out reading chapter 10 of Byung Chul's gamification. Sorry, Psychopolitics. The chapter 10 title is Gamification. In order to heighten productivity, emotional capitalism also enlists playing and games, which should in fact be the other of work, its opposite. Emotional capitalism is gamifying the life and working world. Playing games lends an emotional, indeed a dramatic charge to working, which in turn generates more motivation. Because games rapidly deliver a sense of success and reward, the result is higher performance and a greater yield. A person playing a game, being emotionally invested, is much more engaged than a worker who acts rationally or is simply functioning. And that's why I, as well as probably I'd say 40% of the stock, the crew on the Stowe crew that I was a part of at the Amazon warehouse, worked way harder than we needed to, because they actually have like this a gamified system that I'm not allowed to tell you about. But let's use a metaphor. It's like Tetris is on the screen, and as you work faster, the blocks turn appropriately and sink into a satisfying place. It's like that. Except it's a little bit more like maybe Pokemon or something, but I'm not going to actually tell you anything about it because I'd get sued. Games exhibit and I hurt my elbow trying to play that game, like for real, because it actually gets you to go above and beyond in a way that's not sustainable for 12-hour shifts. And obsessive that I am, and that a lot of the other people were, we were hurting ourselves. And then they tell you, oh, well, you did it to yourself. We don't tell you to do that. We tell you not to do that. And it's like, okay, yeah, but your game seduced me. Games exhibit a specific temporality marked by immediate experiences of success and reward. But what matures over time cannot be gamified. Whatever is long, anything that lasts a long time, proves incompatible with the game's temporality. Hunting, for instance, matches the mode of the game, whereas farming, which depends on slow processes of ripening and quiet growth, cannot be gamified at all. Life cannot be turned into hunting alone. The gamification of work exploits homo ludens. The player subjugates him or herself to the order of domination in the very act of playing. Today, the gamification logic of likes, friends, and followers means that social communication is also being plugged into and subordinated to a game mode. The corollary of the gamification of communication is its commercialization. That said, this process is destroying human communication. A corpse is running society, the corpse of labor. Einleitenden Beresak die Gesellschaft der Leichtmann der Arbeit. So I don't know where that's a quote from. Oh, so begins the Manifesto Against Labor, written by the Crisis Group, which is based around Robert Kurz. Oh my God, someone was telling me about this, and I've been meaning to look into it because it sounds awesome. So I'll repeat the line though. A corpse is running society, the corpse of labor. Following the microelectronic revolution, the argument goes the production of wealth has grown increasingly detached from human labor. Yet at the same time, society has never been so thoroughly committed to work as it is in our post-Fordist age, an epoch that, in actual fact, is only making labor more and more superfluous. The manifesto points out that the political left, in particular, has exalted labor. Not only has it declared work the essence of human being, more still, it has mystified labor and pronounced it the opposite principle to capital. The left does not view work itself as a scandal, only its exploitation. For this reason, the manifesto concludes, the program of all workers' parties has always been simply the liberation of labor instead of liberation from labor. Labor and capital then represent two sides of the same coin. I love that. I freaking love that. Yeah. Obviously, I say that in Timenergy. I did not realize he says that in Psychopolitics. I definitely did not read this book. More and more, I'm just realizing I've never read this book before. I read The Burnout Society and got it confused with Psychopolitics, apparently.
Yeah.
Yet despite highly vigorous forces of production, we have not witnessed the advent of the realm of freedom. Reich der Freiheit, where labor determined by necessity and external expediency ends. Ultimately, Marx himself adhered to the primacy of labor. The increase of free time, he contends, reacts back upon the power of labor as itself the greatest productive power. But with that, the realm of necessity comes to colonize the realm of freedom. Idle time, as time for higher activity, transforms its possessor into a different subject with greater productive force than one who merely toils. As time for the full development of the individual, free time contributes to the production of fixed capital. In fact, this means that knowledge gets capitalized too. In modern parlance, more leisure time means increased human capital. Idleness that might otherwise be devoted to activities free of purpose and constraint are integrated into the operations of capital. Even though Marx speaks of capital fix being man himself, human beings endowed with general intellect are now transforming themselves into capital. In contrast, true freedom would be possible only if life were entirely freed from capital, which represents a new form of transcendence. The transcendence of capital stands in the way of life as immanence. Contrary to Marx's assumptions, the dialectic between forces of production and relations of production is not leading to freedom more than anything else. It is entangling us in exploitation along new lines. We would have to think with Marx, beyond Marx, in order to make freedom, indeed, time that is free, our own. It could only come from the other of work, a wholly other force that no longer serves production or admits transformation into any kind of workforce at all. In other words, freedom could only come from a mode of living, Lebensform, that is no longer a mode of production. Indeed, from something altogether unproductive. The course our future takes will depend on whether we prove able, beyond the world of production, to make use of the useless. Man, I didn't know he says all this stuff. What? All right, here you go. It's right down there.
The human being is a creature of luxury. In the original and authentic sense, luxury is not a practice of consumption. Rather, it means a mode of living that is free of necessity. Freedom is based on deviation, luxuriance, getting away from necessity. Luxury transcends the intention of averting need. But today, consumption is co-opting even luxury. Excessive consumption amounts to unfreedom, compulsion corresponding to the unfreedom of labor. Luxury as freedom, like play that is truly free, can be thought only beyond the world of work and consumption. Viewed in this light, it stands close to asceticism. True happiness comes from what runs riot. Let's go is exuberant and loses meaning, the excessive and superfluous. That is, it comes from what luxuriates, what has taken leave of all necessity, work, performance, and purpose. But today, even excess is being pocketed by capital, which strips it of its emancipatory potential entirely. What is more, playing and games belonged to luxury too, but as play that is not yoked to the process of labor and production. As a means of production, gamification is destroying play's potential to set free. Play should make it possible to use things in wholly different ways. It should liberate them from the theology and teleology of capital. Not long ago, a highly unusual incident in Greece was reported. It was all the more unusual for occurring in a country suffering so greatly under the yoke of capital. The event possesses a singularly emblematic quality, so much so that it seems like a sign from the future. Children, it is said, found a large bundle of banknotes in the ruins of a house. They made use of them in a wholly other way, playing with them and tearing them to shreds. Perhaps these children anticipated a future we will share. The world lies in rubble. In the ruins, we are playing too, tearing apart paper money. Profanation means taking things that belonged to the gods and were therefore removed from mortal use and returning them to human beings to do with as they will. The Greek children were profaning money by handing it over to an entirely other use, games and play. In a single stroke, profanation transformed what is so fetishized today, money, into a common toy. Agamben understands religion in terms of the Latin religare. Accordingly, it means being attentive and alert, watching over things that are holy and taking care that they remain separate from other things. Such setting apart is essential to religion. Profanation, then, means adopting an attitude of conscious negligence with regard to the same watchfulness. The children in Greece were displaying carelessness about money when they simply played with it and tore it apart. As such, profanation represents a practice of freedom that liberates us from transcendence, from any and every form of subjectivization. In this manner, profanation opens a playful margin of immanence. There are two forms of thinking at work and thinking at play.
The conceptions advanced by Hegel and Marx are governed by the principle of work. Likewise, Heidegger's being in time is still bound to working. In its care or anxiety, Dasein does not play. Only later did Heidegger discover play, which is based on releasement. In this light, he came to interpret the world itself as play. Now, he sought out the open of a free space hardly surmised and heated, in which beings come into play as such. Heidegger's time-play space gestures toward a time-space free of labor in any form. In this realm of the event, psychology has been completely surpassed as a mode of subjectivization. Chapter 11, Big Data. Columbus and his egg. Bentham likened his panopticon to Columbus and his egg. By his account, the invention should be applied to all disciplinary milieus of incarceration because it promotes the exceptionally efficient surveillance of inmates. The panopticon represents a watershed in the social order. What would you say if, by the gradual adoption and diversified application of this single principle, you should see a new scene of things spread itself over the face of civilized society? Will big data also prove to be Columbus's egg for the contemporary society of digital control, a system even more effective than Bentham's panopticon? Will it actually manage not just to watch over human behavior, but also to subject it to psychological steering or psychopolitical steering? Is another, wholly unintuited drama poised to redraw the face of civilized society itself. If nothing else, big data has given rise to a highly efficient form of control. Axiom, an American big data company, promises clients a 360-degree customer view. Indeed, the digital panopticon has made possible a wraparound view of those who dwell within it. Bentham's panopticon was confined to a perspectival optical system. This meant that blind spots were unavoidable. Here, prisoners could indulge in secret wishes and thoughts without being observed. Digital surveillance proves so efficient because it is a-perspectival. It does not suffer from the perspectival limitations characterizing analog optical systems. Digital optics enables surveillance from any and every angle. It eliminates all blind spots. In contrast to analog and perspectival optics, it can peer into the human soul itself. Dataism. In the pages of the New York Times, David Brooks has announced a data revolution. His words are as prophetic as Chris Anderson's famous article, The End of Theory. Dataism is the name of the new faith. If you asked me to describe the rising philosophy of the day, I'd say it is dataism. We now have the ability to gather huge amounts of data. This ability seems to carry with it certain cultural assumptions, that everything that can be measured should be measured, that data is a transparent and reliable lens that allows us to filter out emotionalism and ideology, that data will help us do remarkable things, like foretell the future. The data revolution is giving us wonderful ways to understand the present and the past.
Hold on a sec. And is it all in the same bowl?
Yeah, I can just get myself
just separate
some
yours.
and then,
Perfect. So, okay, cool.
Dataism has taken the stage with the fervor of a second enlightenment. During the first enlightenment, statistics was thought to possess the capacity to liberate human knowledge from the clutches of mythology. Accordingly, euphoric celebration occurred. In light of such developments, Voltaire even voiced the wish for a new historiography, freed from past superstition. Statistics, as he put it, offers an object of curiosity for anyone who would like to read history as a citizen and as a philosopher. Revised by statistics, history would become truly philosophical. As Rudiger Kamp writes, the numbers of statistics provide the basis from which Voltaire can articulate his methodological mistrust of all histories that exist only as narratives. The stories of ancient history, accordingly, offer an example that borders on mythology for him. Statistics and enlightenment are one and the same for Voltaire. Statistics means setting objective knowledge founded on and driven by numbers in opposition to mythological narration. Now, transparency is the buzzword of the second enlightenment. Data are supposed to be a pellucid medium. As Brooks describes them, data afford a transparent and reliable lens The imperative of the Second Enlightenment declares everything must become data and information. The soul of the Second Enlightenment is data totalitarianism, or data fetishism. Although it announces that it is taking leave of all ideology, dataism itself is an ideology. It is leading to digital totalitarianism. Therefore, a third enlightenment is called for, in order to shine a light on how digital enlightenment has transformed into a new kind of servitude. Big data is supposed to be freeing knowledge from subjective arbitrariness. By this logic, intuition does not represent a higher form of knowing. Instead, it represents something merely subjective, a stopgap compensating for the shortage of objective data. In complex situations, the argument goes, intuition is blind. The mistrust even extends to theory, which is suspected of being an ideology. If enough data are available, it should prove superfluous as well. Fuck. The Second Enlightenment is the age of purely data-driven knowledge. Anderson's visionary rhetoric goes, out with every theory of human behavior, from linguistics to sociology. Forget taxonomy, ontology, and psychology. Who knows why people do what they do? The point is, they do it, and we can track and measure it with unprecedented fidelity. With enough data, the numbers speak for themselves. The medium of the First Enlightenment was reason. However, imagination, corporeality, and desire were repressed in its name. By a fatal dialectic, the First Enlightenment switched over into barbarism. Now in the Second Enlightenment, which appeals to information, data, and transparency, the same dialectic threatens to do the same. The Second Enlightenment is summoning forth a new kind of violence. The dialectic of enlightenment holds that the process of illumination that set out to destroy mythology became entangled, with every stride it made, in a mythology of its own. False clarity is only another name for myth. Adorno would say that the transparency of today is another name for myth, too. That dataism likewise heralds false clarity. The dialectic of old is also making the Second Enlightenment, which seeks to counter ideology, into an ideology in its own right. More still, it is leading to the barbarism of data. Dataism, it turns out, is amounting to digital Dadaism. Dadaism also takes leave of meaningful contexts of every kind. It empties language itself of sense. The acts of life have no beginning or end. Everything happens in a completely idiotic way. That is why everything is alike. Simplicity is called Dada. Dataism is nihilism. It gives up on any and all meaning. Data and numbers are not narrative. They are additive. Meaning, on the other hand, is based on narration. Data simply fills up the senseless void. Now, numbers and data are not just being absolutized. They are becoming sexualized and fetishized. This amounts to nothing other than libidinal energy flowing into today's quantified self. On the whole, dataism is displaying libidinous, indeed pornographic, traits. Dataists mate with their data. In the meanwhile, there is even talk of data sexuals. They are relentlessly digital and consider data sexy. The digitus is starting to play the part of the phallus.
Ew.
Yeah, man. Quantified self. Belief that life admits measurement and quantification governs the digital age as a whole. Quantified self honors this faith too. The body is outfitted with sensors that automatically register data. Measurements involve temperature, blood sugar levels, calorie intake and use, movement profiles, and fat content. The heart rate is taken in a state of meditation. Performance and efficiency still count when relaxing. Moods, dispositions, and routine activities are all inventoried as well. Such self-measurement and self-monitoring is supposed to enhance mental performance. Yet, the mounting pile of data this yields does nothing to answer the simple question, who am I? Quantified self represents a Dadaist technology too. It empties the self of any and all meaning. The self gets broken down into data until no sense remains. The motto of quantified self is self-knowledge through numbers. But no insight into the self can result from data and numbers alone. no matter how exhaustive they are. Numbers do not recount anything about the self. Counting is not recounting. A sense of self derives from giving an account. It is not counting, but recounting that leads to self-discovery or self-knowledge. In antiquity, the care of the self was also tied to practices of self-observation. Publicatio sui, Tertullian, represented a significant component of paying due attention in this manner. Writing was also important in the culture of taking care of oneself. One of the main features of taking care involved taking notes on oneself to be reread, writing treatises and letters to friends to help them, and keeping notebooks in order to reactivate for oneself the truths one needed. Publicatio sui meant committing to the search for truth. Records of one's life served an ethics of the self. In contrast, dataism's self-tracking is devoid of all ethics and truth. It amounts simply to a technology for self-monitoring. When the data collected is published and exchanged, self-tracking comes to resemble self-surveillance more and more. The subject of today's world is an entrepreneur of the self practicing self-exploitation, and by the same token, self-surveillance. The auto-exploiting subject carries around its own labor camp. Here, it is perpetrator and victim at one and the same time. As a self-illuminating, self-surveilling subject, it bears its own internal panopticon within. Here, there is no difference between guard and inmate. The digitalized network subject is a panopticon of itself. This ensures that each and every person has now taken on the task of conducting perpetual auto-surveillance. Life logged in full. Today, the clicks we make and the search words we type are stored. Every step is watched and recorded. A complete picture of our lives exists on the internet. Our digital habitus provides an extremely precise likeness of our persons, of our very souls. Perhaps it is even fuller and more accurate than the images we otherwise make of ourselves. The number of web addresses now available is practically unlimited. As such, any item of use can be given its own internet address. Objects themselves are starting to transmit information. They report on our lives, activities, and habits. The expansion of Web 2.0, the Internet of Persons, to Web 3.0, the Internet of Things, is bringing digital control society to completion. Web 3.0 has made it possible to log life in every aspect. Now the very things we use every day are also surveilling us. We are caught, so to speak, in the total memory of the digital. Bentham's panopticon still lacked an efficient recording system. It had only a punishment log for penalties enacted and the reasons they occurred. Prisoners' actual lives were not taken down. Big Brother had no way of knowing what inmates really thought or desired. In contrast to Big Brother, who could be quite forgetful, Big Data never forgets anything at all. For this reason alone, the digital panopticon is much more efficient than Bentham's. Indeed, in U.S. elections, big data and data mining have proven to be Columbus's egg. Candidates obtain a 360-degree view of voters. Enormous masses of data are gathered from various sources, bought, in fact, and connected to each other in such a way that highly precise voter profiles result. In the process, clients also gain insight into voters' private lives and their very psyche. Through micro-targeting, personalized messages are devised to address and influence voters. As the practical microphysics of power, micro-targeting is data-driven psychopolitics. Likewise, intelligent algorithms make it possible to predict voting behavior and optimize candidates' appeal. Individually calibrated messages to voters are hardly anything different than personalized advertisements. More and more, voting and buying, the state and the market, citizens and consumers are coming to resemble each other. Micro-targeting is becoming the standard practice of psychopolitics. The census, which represents a biopolitical practice of disciplinary society, provides material that may be used demographically, but not psychologically. Biopolitics is incapable of enabling subtle interventions in the psyche. In contrast, digital psychopolitics manages to intervene in psychic processes in a prospective fashion. Quite possibly, it is even faster than free will. As such, it could overtake it. If so, this would herald the end of freedom. The digital unconscious. It is possible that big data can even read desires we do not know we harbor. After all, Under certain circumstances, we develop inclinations that elude consciousness. Often, we do not even know why we suddenly experience a certain need. For instance, at a given stage of pregnancy, a woman may crave a particular product. Yet this impulse marks a correlation of which she remains unaware. She buys the item, but she doesn't know why. That's how it is. Conceivably, that's how it is, exists in psychic proximity to the Freudian id, which escapes the ego and consciousness. In this light, big data is making the id into an ego to be exploited psychopolitically. If big data has access to the realm of our unconscious actions and inclinations, it is possible to construct a psychopolitics that would reach deep into our psyche to exploit it. According to Walter Benjamin, the movie camera affords access to the optical unconscious. With the close-up, space expands. With slow motion, movement is extended. Clearly, it is another nature which speaks to the camera as compared to the eye. Other, above all in this sense that a space informed by human consciousness gives way to a space informed by the unconscious. We are familiar with the movement of picking up a cigarette lighter or a spoon, but know almost nothing of what really goes on between hand and metal, and still less how this varies with different moods. This is where the camera comes into play, with all its resources for swooping and rising, disrupting and isolating, stretching or compressing a sequence, enlarging or reducing an object. It is through the camera that we first discover the optical unconscious, just as we discover the instinctual unconscious through psychoanalysis. One may understand big data in an analogy to a movie camera, as a digital magnifying glass. Data mining would enlarge the picture of human actions. Behind the framework of consciousness, it would then disclose another scene shot through with unconscious elements. Big data's microphysics, then, would make actomes visible, that is, micro-actions that elude detection by the waking mind. Thus, big data could also bring the light of collective patterns of behavior, of which individuals are unaware. This would render the collective unconscious accessible. In analogy to the optical unconscious, one could call such a microphysical or micro-psychical web of relations the digital unconscious. As such, digital psychopolitics would be in the position to take control of mass behavior on a level that escapes detection.
Where's that? Oh, is it in the new page?
Yeah, right at the top.
Sick. Nance is getting all ashed out. You can just serve yourself and eat, and I'll read while you do it. Because the food is ready. In fact, let me show the viewer what we got here. We got some fried sourdough bread. And we have some sausage, potato, and I'm stoked about it. All right, so this section is called Big Business. It's not a new chapter. It's the same chapter.
Yeah, this is like the only long chapter in this book.
The only long chapter in the whole book. And is this the gamification chapter?
No, big data.
We're on big data now. Okay, big business. Today, big data is not just taking the stage as Big Brother. It is also taking the form of big business. First and foremost, big data is a vast commercial enterprise. Here, personal data are unceasingly monetized and commercialized. Now people are treated and traded as packages of data for economic use. That is, human beings have become a commodity. Big Brother and big business have formed an alliance. The surveillance state and the market are merging. I'm glad he says that, because I take that to be the most interesting thing about big data, is that it is where the state and capital have completely shared interests. You might have a company like Apple say, well, we can't go too far with the state because that'll be bad for business, because that would reflect poorly on us. But the general tendency of capital itself is to see these things that benefit the surveillance state also in its own interest. Axiom is a company trading in the personal data of about 300 million US citizens. In other words, practically all of them. Yeah, about 65 million are missing. By now, Axiom knows more about Americans than the FBI. The company divides people into 70 categories. In the catalog, they are offered up like goods for sale. For any need, there is something to buy. People with a low economic value are designated as waste, that is trash. Consumers with a higher market value are found in the group shooting star. From ages 36 to 45, they are dynamic, get up early to go jogging, have no children, but are married, like to travel, and watch Seinfeld. Big data is leading to the emergence of a new digital class society. Human beings assigned to the waste category belong to the lowest class. People with a bad score are denied credit. Thus, the panopticon has been joined by a banopticon. The panopticon kept watch over prison. Damn. The panopticon kept watch over prisoners of the system who were incarcerated. The banopticon, on the other hand, is a dispositive that identifies persons who stand outside the system or are hostile to it and excludes them. The classical panopticon served to discipline. In contrast, the banopticon ensures the system's security and efficiency. This is where his conception of neoliberalism goes so well into a sort of proto-neo-feudalism, right? Like it's really setting the basis for it, because what he just called a digital class society is it's a digital caste society, because when we talk about people not being able to access things on the basis of credit, that's not a class anymore, that's a caste, right? The digital panopticon identifies human beings without economic value as waste. Waste is something to be eliminated. Quote, they are all redundant, the rejects or refuse of society. To sum up, waste. Waste by definition is the antonym of utility. It denotes objects without possible use. Indeed, the sole accomplishment of waste is soiling and cluttering up the space that could otherwise be usefully employed. The principal purpose of the panopticon is to make sure that the waste is separated from decent product and earmarked for transportation to a refuse tip. That quote, I don't know where that quote is coming from. He does have a footnote on it, but this is not an EPUB, so I can't just tap on it. I'm not going to go looking for it. I would like to know where that is coming from. I think it might be Axiom's own, like, this is the people that... Axiom owns more information than the FBI on the U.S. population. I think that it's actually Axiom's
Marketing materials?
own shit that they're talking... Yeah. This makes me want to read that more than anything else in the world. I didn't know about this. But I'm going to stop this. Forgetting. Human memory is a narrative, an account. Forgetting forms a necessary component. In contrast, digital memory is a matter of seamless addition and accumulation. Stored data admit counting, but they cannot be recounted. Storage and retrieval are fundamentally different from remembering, which is a narrative process. Likewise, autobiography constitutes a narrative. It is memorial writing. A timeline, on the other hand, recounts nothing. It simply enumerates and adds up events or information. Memory constitutes a dynamic living process. Here, different levels of time intersect and influence each other. Memory is subject to constant rewriting and rearrangement. Freud understood human memory as a living organism too. Quote, as you know, I'm working on the assumption that our psychic mechanisms have come into being by a process of stratification. The material present in the form of memory traces being subjected from time to time to a rearrangement in accordance with fresh circumstances, to a retranscription. Thus, what is essentially new about my theory is the thesis that memory is present not once but several times over, that it is laid down in various kinds of indications. End quote. That was Freud. In other words, the past, as something that remains self-identical and is always to be retrieved in the same form, does not exist. Digital memory consists of indifferent, as it were, undead points of presence. It lacks the extended horizon constituting the temporality of the living. This means the digitized life lacks animacy. Digital temporality belongs to the undead. And that, I would add, is the subject of sociology today. Because all sociology does today is try to interpret data instead of humans. Spirit. Big data opens up the prospect of absolute knowledge. Everything can be measured and quantified. The things of the world reveal correlations that were previously hidden. Even human behavior is supposed to admit exact prediction. A new age of insight is being announced. Correlations are replacing causality. That's how it is stands where how so once wavered. That's how it is stands where how so once wavered. I like that. The data-driven quantification of reality is driving spirit from the realm of knowledge. Hegel, the philosopher of spirit, would deem the omniscience that big data promises to be absolute ignorance. Hegel's logic may also be read as the logic of knowledge. Here, correlation represents the most primitive level. A strong correlation between A and B means that if A changes, a change also occurs in B. But when a correlation holds, however strong it may be, one still does not know why this is the case. It just is that way. Correlation represents a relation of probability, not of necessity. It declares A often occurs together with B. That is the difference between correlation and causation, which is distinguished by necessity. A causes B. But causality does not stand at the highest level of knowledge. Reciprocity represents a more complex relation than causal relation. It declares A and B condition each other mutually. A necessary connection between A and B. And yet, even at the level of reciprocity, the overarching context for the connection between A and B has not yet been grasped, as in conceived, begriffen. Quote, if we stop at considering a given content just from the point of view of reciprocal action, we are in fact proceeding quite unconceptually. End quote. I think that's probably Hegel. Only the concept brings forth knowledge. The concept is C, which comprehends within itself A and B. Here, A and B are first conceived. The concept is the higher context surrounding A and B, which provides the foundation for the relationship between A and B. Thus, A and B stand as moments of a third, higher whole. Knowledge becomes possible only at the level of the concept. The concept dwells within the things themselves. It is that through which they become what they are. And to comprehend an object means, therefore, to become conscious of its concept. Only from the all-comprehending concept C is complete comprehension of the correlation between A and B possible. In contrast, big data affords only extremely rudimentary knowledge, that is, correlations in which nothing is comprehended. Big data lacks comprehension. It lacks the concept, and thus it lacks spirit. And don't put my food away. I'm waiting for you to read. No. Don't. Just take it. I'm waiting for you. I want to eat. Big data lacks comprehension. It lacks the concept, and thus it lacks spirit. The absolute knowledge intimated by big data coincides with absolute ignorance. And now, a special guest appearance from...
You done here?
Yeah.
Okay. Hold on. I need you to tell me if there's food in my teeth or on my mouth.
Okay. Smile. Not really.
Don't say not. Pause. All right. I'm really white, pale in this, but you know, I kind of look like a ghost, but it's fine. Ghost Ann, the man, here to read to you. The concept is a unity that includes and comprises the elements of the whole that it is. It takes the form of a conclusion in which everything is comprised and comprehended. Everything is a syllogism, means everything is a concept. Absolute knowledge is an absolute syllogism. Everything takes conclusive form within it. The definition of the absolute is that it is the syllogism, i.e., the conclusion. But constant addition yields no conclusion, no syllogism, no putting together. Syllogism is not addition, but narration. The absolute conclusion excludes any further addition. As narration, syllogism represents the opposite of addition. Big data is purely additive. It never comes to an end, to a conclusion. In contrast to the correlations and additions that big data generates, theoretical thinking represents a narrative form of knowledge. The spirit is a conclusion, a syllogism, an integral whole in which competent parts are meaningfully preserved. The integral whole is a conclusive form, but without spirit, the whole world falls apart into merely additive, unincorporated elements. Spirit constitutes the world's interiority and composure, what gathers or composes everything within itself. Theory is also conceptual, syllogistic, because it comprehends all the elements it includes. Ultimately, the end of theory that Chris Anderson has trumpeted means taking leave of spirit. Big data makes spirit, that is, thinking and thought, wither and die. Human science, Geisteswissenschaft, that is purely data-driven, is, in fact, no longer human. It has no Geist, or spirit. Totalized data knowledge amounts to absolute ignorance, the absolute zero of spirit. The science of logic declares, the syllogism is what is rational, and it is everything that is rational. It is a conclusion, or Schluss. For Hegel, the syllogism is not a category of formal logic. A syllogism follows when the beginning and end of a process from a meaningful set of relations, a unity that makes sense. Unlike mere addition, then, narration is a syllogism. Knowledge, the state of knowing, is a syllogism. Rituals and ceremonies are syllogistic forms too. They represent a narrative process. As such, they have their own temporality, their own rhythm and pace. As narratives, they defy acceleration. But when all syllogistic forms fall apart, everything dissolves. Nothing has a stay. In a world where everything has become additive, where all narrative tension, any vertical tautness has gone missing, total acceleration sets in. Today, our perceptive apparatus itself is incapable of arriving at any conclusion. It just clicks its way through the endless digital net. Our senses are completely distracted. Yet only contemplative lingering manages to achieve any meaningful end. Shutting one's eyes offers a symbol for arriving at a conclusion. Abrupt change from image to image, from information to information, has made any such contemplative conclusion impossible. If all that qualifies as reasonable is a syllogism, a conclusion, then our era, the age of big data, is an epoch without reason. Let's help the baby. I was just tugging on him a little bit. He's just gonna take the little nap. The event. When the statistical method was discovered in the 17th century, it captivated scientists, gamblers, poets, and philosophers alike. Enthusiastically, they embraced statistical probability and regularity. There can be no doubt that such euphoria admits comparison with the fortunes of big data today. Then, statistics inspired renewed trust in a higher power for people as they confronted the contingencies of the world. For instance, an 18th century treatise by John Arbuthnot was called An Argument for Divine Providence, taken from the regularly observed in the British births of both sexes. On the basis of the statistically determined predominance of male infants relative to female ones, philosophers saw the hand of God at work, and found further reason to justify war. Even Kant got carried away by the possibilities that statistical calculation afforded. He incorporated the lawful order it allowed him to discern into the teleological view of history. On the one hand, he posited the existence of free will. On the other, he restricted it. Kant affirmed that phenomena of free will, that is, human actions, are determined by general laws of nature, like every other natural fact. If one considers the play of freedom and human will On a large scale, lawfulness may be discerned. As unruly as the conduct of individual subjects seems to be, a steady progression, though slow development of, original predispositions is recognizable at the level of the species. To make this point, Kant refers to statistics. Thus, marriages, the births that come from them, and deaths, since the free will of human beings has so great an influence on them, seem to subject to no rule in accordance with which their number could be determined in advance, through calculation, and yet the annual tables of them in large countries prove that they happen just as much in accordance with constant laws of nature as weather conditions, which are so inconstant, whose individual occurrence one cannot previously determine, but which on the whole do not fail to sustain the growth of plants, the course of streams, and other natural arrangements in a uniform, uninterrupted course. Individual human beings and even whole nations think little about the fact, since while each pursues its own aim in its own way, and one often contrary to the other, they are proceeding unnoticed, as by a guiding thread, according to an aim of nature, which is unknown to them, and are laboring at its promotion. That was all Kant. In essence, the first Enlightenment was committed to belief in statistical knowledge. Rousseau's volonté générale results from statistical mathematic operations too. The general will takes form without any communication at all. It results from statistical averages. This is a quote. There is often a considerable difference between the will of all and the general will. The latter looks only to the common interest, the former looks to private interest, and is nothing but a sum of particular wills. But if, from these same wills, one takes away the pluses and the minuses, which cancel each other out, what is left as the sum of the differences is the general will. Rousseau stresses that arriving at the general will requires no communication. Indeed, it excludes it. Communication distorts statistical objectivity. Accordingly, he would like to prohibit political parties and associations. The democracy he envisions is democracy without discourse or communication. Proceeding statistically is supposed to yield a synthesis of quantity and truth. Rousseau offers a biopolitical response to the question of the features defining a good government. He avoids approaching the question morally. For him, the purpose of a political association is simply the protection and welfare of its members. The surest sign of success is the increase of population. Unquestionably, for him, the best government is the one in which the citizens become populous and multiply the most. Thus he sounds the call. Calculators, it is now up to you. Count, measure, compare.
Did Rousseau say that?
Apparently?
Holy shit. Is that just in the Prince?
I don't know.
That's crazy.
Today's euphoria about big data strongly resembles the euphoria about statistics in the 18th century, which did not last for long, however. Statistics was surely the big data of the 18th century. Before long, resistance mounted against statistical reason, above all, on the part of Romanticism. The fundamental effect of Romanticism is horror at everything average and normal. The singular, improbable, and sudden stand opposed to which is merely probable in statistical terms. Romanticism cultivated the outlandish, abnormal, and the extreme in order to counter statistical normality. Nietzsche also shared this abhorrence for statistical reason. Here's a quote. Statistics proves that there are laws in history. Yes, it proves how vulgar and disgustingly uniform the masses are. You should have kept statistics in Athens. Then you would have sensed the difference. The more inferior and unindividual the masses are, the more rigorous the statistical law. If the multitude has a more refined and nobler composition, then the law immediately goes to the devil. And way up at the top, where the great minds are, you no longer can make any calculations at all. When, for example, have great artists ever gotten married? You are hopeless, you who want to discover a law in this. Thus, to the extent that there are laws in history, they are worthless, and history itself, that is, everything that has occurred, is worthless.
Okay, I want to
Thanks,
really
Nietzsche.
quick. Yeah, thanks, Nietzsche. I want to get reactions really quick because I was thinking base Nietzsche, but you look like not.
No, I like it is based, but it's also like, yeah, tell us how you really feel, Nietzsche. Like, like it is. Yeah, of course that does seem to bear out, but it's just fucked up to have him like so openly shitting on people. But he's not wrong.
It misses the sympathetic sort of structural understanding of how stultification of time energy makes us dumb and predictable,
docile.
Right? And I think Marcuse in One Dimensional Man is more sympathetic and kind of gets that at least. But also, it is like nice to hear. For me, it's always a breath of fresh air to hear Nietzsche just say the thing.
Yeah.
That it's like, yeah, we would have to dress that up in a bunch of caveats.
Well,
The structuralify it, when in reality, it's just like, yeah, at the base level, though, it's the thing that you can always tell sociologists is like, well, I don't give a fuck what most people think. I just don't give a shit. Like, at a certain level, when it comes to certain things.
but we want.
We're being told that what's normal is basically indicative of what we are or what I'm supposed to be. Like, what white people are statistically is somehow supposed to resemble me or something like that. And it's like, I don't feel represented in this. And it's like, the more singular you are, the less you're going to be able to be predicted by big data. And like Arendt does a huge thing on this in The Human Condition. So I don't know. I didn't know Nietzsche said that though.
Like, we want to bring about a world where we do give a shit what most people think.
Yes.
Because the world we live in right now, no. We don't give a shit what most people think because most people aren't thinking.
Yeah. And if most people had voice, they'd just babble. And so it's like, no, I really want to be in a world where old people are interesting. They have wisdom to share. Where young people are into things, researching stuff, curious, you know, instead of just like blah, 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 consumption, blah, 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 drama, blah, blah, blah. So, thanks for reading that Nietzsche quote. That was base.
Yeah, this chapter's almost done. I finished it out. Statistics does not take into consideration great active individuals on the stage of history, but only the supernumeraries. Nietzsche inveighs against a version of history that takes the great drives of the masses to be what is important and that views all great men merely as their expression, as the bubbles that become visible on the surface of the flood.
We're back.
Oh, do I still look like a ghost as much?
Less so.
A little bit.
A little bit less. I mean, you always look like a ghost,
Just
but
kind
yeah.
of white.
We had to fix like it was on the settings for last night. The camera was high ISO so that we could be seen in the dark, basically.
For Nietzsche, the figures of statistics prove only that man is a herd animal. He observes that die Menschen zusammen ihm gleich werden. This means both that people are increasingly growing equal and that people batten, i.e. grow fat, as they become the same. Such Gleichaltung also characterizes our contemporary society of transparency and information. When everything is made visible at once, deviations can scarcely occur. Transparency entails a compulsion to conform, which eliminates the other, the alien, and the deviant. Above all, big data makes collective patterns of behavior visible. Dataism is augmenting zusammen im Gleichwerden, or hypertrophied sameness. Data mining does not differ from statistics in any fundamental way. The correlations it lays bare represent only what is likely in statistical terms. It calculates average values. As such, big data has no access to what is unique. Big data is wholly blind to the event. Not what is statistically likely, but what is unlikely, the singular, the event, will shape history. In other words, the future of mankind. Thus, big data is blind to the future, too. There you go.
Good job.
Yeehaw.
he's being precious. He's like rolling around and just being so cute over here. Oh, he wants to play.
He's a precious baby.
He wants to play.
He's a precious baby. Look how fuzzy he is.
He's
a fuzzy wuzzy.
Yeah, it's amazing. Good job. Thank you. All right, we're back. We're back and we're ready to do the rest of this within 12 hours, basically.
Man. Yep. Pretty fucking dope, if you ask us.
Yeah. This is our favorite thing ever. Chapter 12, Beyond the Subject. What Nietzsche refers to as the naturification of the human being includes readiness for what is absolutely sudden and thwarting. The event, which annuls what has held until now, the standing order, proves just as incalculable and abrupt as a natural disaster or act of God. It defies all calculation and prediction. When it occurs, an entirely new state of affairs begins. The event brings into play an outside, which breaks the subject open and wrests it from subjection. Events represent breaks in discontinuities. They open up new spaces for action. Following Nietzsche's lead, Foucault also advances a conception of history that deals with events in terms of their most unique characteristics, their most acute manifestations. Event, for Foucault, means the reversal of a relationship of forces, the usurpation of power, the appropriation of a vocabulary against those who had once used it. When an event occurs, one suddenly speaks another language. It entails a break with all certainty that has held until now, inasmuch as it calls to life a wholly different constellation of being. Events are turns, where a reversal, an overthrow of domination occurs. The event means that something takes place. Something was wholly absent from conditions beforehand. In contrast to experiencing, experience is founded on discontinuity. Experience means transformation. In an interview, Foucault remarked that for Nietzsche, Blanchot, and Bataille, experience has the function of wrenching the subject from itself, of seeing to it that the subject is no longer itself, or that it is brought to its annihilation or its dissolution. Being a subject means being subjected, being cast under by a higher instance, right? Remember, he was playing off of this in the very beginning of the book.
Yeah.
Experience tears the subject out from subjection, out of its downcast state. It signifies the opposite of the neoliberal psychopolitics of experiencing or emotion, which only ensnares the subject deeper and deeper in the state of subjection and subjugation. So experience tears us out, whereas experiencing is just getting bogged down in it. He's using the German words Erlebnis versus Erfahrung. Erfahrung. Following Foucault, the art of living may be understood as a practice of freedom, bringing forth an entirely different mode of existence. It unfolds as de-psychologization. Quote, the art of living is the art of killing psychology, of creating with oneself and with others unnamed individualities, beings, realities, qualities. If one can't manage to do that in one's life, that life is not worth living. End quote. Damn. The art of living stands opposed to the psychological terror through which subjugating subjectivization occurs. Neoliberal psychopolitics is a technology of domination that stabilizes and perpetuates the prevailing system by means of psychological programming and steering. Accordingly, the art of living as a praxis of freedom must proceed by way of de-psychologization. This serves to disarm psychopolitics, which is a means of effecting submission. When the subject is de-psychologized, indeed devoided, it opens onto a mode of existence that still has no name, an unwritten future.
Chapter 13, Idiotism.
In his 1980 course on Spinoza, Deleuze observed, "To the letter, I'd say they play the fool. Play the fool. Playing the fool. That's always been one function of philosophy." One of the roles of philosophy is to play the fool or idiot. From its inception, philosophy has been closely tied to idiotism. Every philosopher who has brought forth a new idiom, a new language, a new way of thinking, has necessarily been an idiot. Only the idiot has access to the wholly other. Idiotism discloses a field of immanence of events and singularities for thought. This field eludes subjectivization and psychologization altogether. The history of philosophy is a history of idiotisms. Socrates knows only that he does not know. He is an idiot. Likewise, Descartes, who casts doubt on everything, is an idiot. Cogito ergo sum is idiotic. It takes an inner contraction of thinking to make a new beginning possible. Descartes thinks by thinking thought. By relating only to itself, thought regains a virginal state. Deleuze places the Cartesian idiot in opposition to an idiot of another kind. The old idiot wanted indubitable truths at which he could arrive by himself. In the meantime, he would doubt everything. The new idiot has no wish for indubitable truths. He wills the absurd. This is not the same image of thought. The old idiot wanted truth, but the new idiot wants to turn the absurd into the highest power of thought. Today, it seems, the type of the outsider, the idiot, the fool, has all but vanished from society. Thoroughgoing digital networking and communication have massively amplified the compulsion to conform. The attendant violence of consensus is suppressing idiotisms. Botho Strauss pinpoints the difference between contemporary conformism and bourgeois convention of old. For him,
Is it Strauss?
yeah. For him, the idiot, it's as if everyone else were speaking in subtle attunement with each other, brought down to the most agreeable level. This is a far more implicable convention than any convention known before in bourgeois times. The idiot is idiosyncratic. Literally, idiosyncrasy refers to a specific and peculiar mixture of the body's humors and the oversensitivity this entails. When communication is to be accelerated, idiosyncrasy poses an obstacle inasmuch as it amounts to an immunological defense against the other. Idiosyncrasy stands in the way of unbounded communicative exchange. Accordingly, immunosuppression is necessary for acceleration to proceed. But now, immune responses are subjected to massive suppression so that information will circulate faster and capital will accelerate. Communication achieves maximum velocity when the same reacts to the same. In contrast, the resistance and recalcitrance of otherness, of foreignness, troubles and impedes the smooth communication of the same. In the inferno of the same, communication attains its highest speed. In light of compulsive and coercive communication and conformism, idiotism represents a practice of freedom. By nature, the idiot is unallied, unnetworked, and uninformed. The idiot inhabits the immemorial outside, which escapes communication and networking altogether. The idiot spins about like a plucked rose in the whirling river of a single-minded people, people in consent, those who have been incorporated and belong to a wondrous common understanding. The idiot is a modern-day heretic. Etymologically, heresy means choice. Thus, the heretic is one who commands free choice, the courage to deviate from orthodoxy. As a heretic, the idiot represents a figure of resistance opposing the violence of consensus. The idiot preserves the magic of the outsider. Today, in light of increasingly coercive conformism, it is more urgent than ever to heighten heretical consciousness. Idiotism stands opposed to the neoliberal power of domination, total communication and total surveillance. The idiot does not communicate. Indeed, he communicates with the incommunicable. As such, the idiot veils himself in silence. Idiotism erects spaces for guarding silence, quiet, and solitude, where it is still possible to say what really deserves to be said. Deleuze already called for such a politics of silence in 1995. He directed it against neoliberal psychopolitics, which forces communication and disclosure. It's not a problem of getting people to express themselves, but of providing little gaps of solitude and silence in which they might eventually find something to say.
Repressive forces don't stop people from expressing themselves, but rather force them to express themselves. What a relief to have nothing to say, the right to say nothing, because only then is there a chance of framing the rare and ever rarer thing that might be worth saying. Yeah, man. Silence is violence. Pixar didn't happen. Like, share, subscribe.
Right.
Get in the comments. All these things. Yeah.
Woo! But also,
Do it.
do it. Or we'll die.
We'll die.
But don't just say for the algorithm. Like, tell us what we're saying as far as you understand it, or get out. That's our new rule. We've been talking about this. We just hate the comments that are just... How would you describe those kind of comments that we were getting at the... Like, we do these, like, projections onto the back of the room for our presentations, and we put the YouTube live chat on the wall so people can see it if they want to, so the speaker can see it too. And it ends up just being like, what? I don't know. How would you say?
It's just, it's this. It's people believe that they're expressing themselves, and people are so conditioned to express themselves. Like, the thing that gets me the most is the understander of things, the knower of everything. Like the guy or girl or
But usually
person, usually guy, but the individual that comes into the live chat or into the comment section after the fact and just has to take cheap shots or has to somehow like try to score points or like get their point across. And it's like, dude, we don't give a shit. Like, if you have something to say, there's a way to get into actual dialogue with us. There really is. Get the fucking app. Go to the website.
Take a course.
Take a course. Join in the actual conversation that is actually happening. But when you try to hijack this space that's been built to extend this conversation, and when you try to make it about you and your thoughts and your feelings and your opinions and your predilections and your predispositions and all your dumb bullshit, you really do derail something that we are like pouring ourselves into. And it's bullshit. Fuck you.
Yeah, it's like going to the skate park that some people built, and they're all skating, and you show up, and then every time someone does a trick, you say, "Oh yeah, I know a guy who did that."
Yeah.
Or, "Oh, that reminds me. That reminds me of something someone else did." And it's this relating that is leveling, that sort of never lets like what is actually taking place be appreciated in its own, like. And the thing is like, everyone's gonna bring their own experience and perspective to the thing, but please do bring your perspective to it by telling us what we're saying in your own words, and then asking critical questions about it that aren't just like, really, but more like, oh, how might that? So, I don't know. I obviously would have to be specific, but...
Well, look, man, if we're having a conversation about organizing, for example, and we're talking about, the efficacy of organizing and thought and thinking and theorizing and blah, 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 and then you come in and you're like, hey, I have my specific project, and we can all tell you're full of shit, by the way, but you have a hyper-specific, hyper-niche fucking project, and you want to make... First of all, you're not listening to the conversation because you're not asking about the conversation. You're just doing this broad, vague, like, how does this relate to my specific thing? Fuck you.
Yeah. This has happened already on the tour with multiple times, so that's why we're bringing it up. But anyway, so like, comment, subscribe, but do it in a singular way.
Yeah.
Don't do it in this like, cheapen whatever is the topic at hand by relating it to something else that is outside the wheelhouse of what we were immediately dealing with.
Look,
try to get your teeth sunk into the meat of what we're actually all trying to understand together as the actual subject matter.
If you really are that much smarter than everybody, smarter than us, come to an actual conversation. Actually join the conversation and show us why we're so dumb. Show us what we're missing by explaining it to us. Don't do these one-liners. Don't do these zingers, these gotchas.
Or just anything where the subtext could easily be interpreted as, well, I know things. I am smart. I'm not stupid. I'm smarter than you.
I'm smarter than you.
Wait, Anne, how does it go?
I know that. I'm not stupid. I'm smarter than you.
That's the best, dude.
I'm smarter than you.
But that is the subtext in most comments. It does seem like it's like assuming this weird posture of like the student supposed to know, or the student supposedly the master, as opposed to, oh, I am trying to understand this, and the fact that I think I get it has me worried because I probably don't. So let's get this clear. Do I get it? If that's not the mentality that you're performing, because obviously it's a performance, but if you're not performing that, then it's just not the space for you, because that is the space we're trying to inhabit here.
Yeah.
Is that Byung Chul Han is a master. We are learning from this master. Whether we disagree with him in the future or not is less important than being able to inhabit his way of seeing, which is a wonderful amalgamation or condensation or synthesis of all of the shit that we've been studying. So
Yeah. And yeah, man, like if you just feel the need to immediately relate it, just try to like let shit sink in. Give it time, let it breathe, all that stuff. Before you immediately start doing, oh, it's just
this, it's just that. Oh, you're just saying this. Oh, you're just saying that.
Yeah. The idiot savant has access to knowledge of a different order. He raises himself above the horizontal plane, above merely being informed and networked. The term idiot savant, as the autistic first were called, should perhaps be freed up and used for those adventurers who are not simply tied to one another, but to something else. Idiotism opens up virginal space, forging the distance required by thought so that speaking may occur in an entirely different manner. The idiot savant lives from the far away, like a stylite. Vertical tension enables him to find higher agreement, receptivity to events, broadcasts from the future, stylite, pillar, dweller, antenna. The waves of the overflowing message generate in the mouth of the holy man the same noise as the faint signals the idiot receives from the world. It's either Deleuze or Foucault, I don't know who. Intelligence means choosing between. It is not entirely free insofar as it is caught in a between, which depends on the system in operation. Intelligence has no access to outside, because it makes a choice between options in a system. Therefore, intelligence does not really exercise free choice. It can only select among the offerings the system affords. Intelligence follows the logic of a system. It is system immanent. A given system defines a given intelligence. Accordingly, intelligence has no access to what is wholly other. It inhabits a horizontal plane. In contrast, the idiot has contact with the vertical dimension inasmuch as he takes leave of the prevailing system. That is, abandons intelligence. The inside of idiocy is delicate and transparent, like a dragonfly's wing. It glistens with intelligence that has been overcome. In his final work, Pure Immanence, Essays on Life, Deleuze elevates immanence to a formula for beatitude. We will say of pure immanence that it is a life and nothing else. It is not immanence to life, but the immanent that is in nothing is itself a life. A life is the immanence of immanence, absolute immanence. It is complete power, complete bliss. Immanence is something immanent that is in nothing because it does not occur in something else. It exists only in itself. As such, it is the immanence of immanence. It is subject to nothing, rather it is self-sufficient. No order of domination can be erected on this level of life's immanence. In contrast, capital manifests itself as transcendence. It estranges life from itself. Immanence as life suspends this alienating relationship. Pure immanence is the void, which can neither be psychologized nor subjectivized. Immanent life is lighter and richer, indeed freer, for such emptiness. The idiot is not defined by individuality or subjectivity, but by singularity. As such, the idiot is similar in nature to the child, who is not yet an individual, not yet a person. The child's existence is not determined by individual qualities so much as impersonal events. For example, very small children all resemble one another and have hardly any individuality, but they have singularities, a smile, a gesture, a funny face, not subjective qualities.
Small children, through all their sufferings and weaknesses, are infused with an immanent life that is pure power and even bliss. The idiot is like Deleuze's homo tantum, one who no longer has a name, though he can be mistaken for no other. The sphere of immanence to which the idiot gains admittance is the matrix of desubjectivization and depsychologization. It is negativity, wresting the subject out of itself and liberating it into the immensity of an empty time. The idiot does not exist as a subject. He is more like a flower, an existence simply open to light. The end. Dun, dun,
Holy
dun. So that final part was actually kind of getting at this the role of the student.
I just realized the microphone won't work if you're
If
pointing
it's
it away.
backwards.
Yeah.
Um
So wait, you said you just realized what?
that final chapter was kind of getting at this role we've been talking about of the student, or as the learner, or as the one who is paying attention to learn the thing, rather than the one who is the smart guy who knows everything. I think calling it idiocy is taking it a bit too far. I think it's fetishizing it a little bit. It's doing the Foucault thing, but it's also true.
I like how Slavoj Žižek was like, oh, so let me get how this is going to work. So there's going to be a bunch of idiots in here, and then some idiot's going to ask me a question. I'm an idiot too. Like he was
Yeah.
just like, we're all idiots here, but that's not what we're doing. That's not what Byung Chul is doing.
No. And I think it's, I don't know, poetic license, sure. He's playing with idioms and idiocy and idiotism. Like, I get why he's saying it, but I do think I would choose a better word than idiot. I don't like idiot. That is too easily fetishizable. I mean, just, it's the noble savage, the accidental savant, the idiot savant. Like, we should honor intelligence. We should honor critical thinking. Intelligence is not just discrimination. It's not just thinking between things. But he is also getting at something true. You do need to be an empty vessel of a sort in order to be filled up in the first place.
Mm. And so he is putting this forward as an alternative to being a subjugated subject or projecting project.
Yeah.
Is be like a flower.
Yeah. Be an idiot.
Just be simply open to the light.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't like to close out an exegetical by saying, well, I just disagree with that. Now, here's my take, because I think that's a bad example. But it does contrast with our general tendency, which is to say, yeah, well, take the the fact that we are subjectivized as projects and that we are always feeling guilty if we're not grinding and hustling. Take that and harness it rather than counteract it.
Yeah.
Harness it towards multilingual activities. Harness it towards and that's the thing. Harness your ADHD towards doing lots of good things. You know, like productive procrastination against what you're supposed to be doing towards other awesome things that you could be doing, and mix it up. And that, you know, it's like I am exploiting myself. We're only hurting ourselves out here. We're giving you everything. We're only hurting ourselves, right? As the song we were listening to last night says, right?
But we're not doing it to entertain you. We're doing it to educate ourselves and you.
And to show everyone what's possible if you have time energy. Because if we don't get time energy pilled, no politics will ever be a solution. Like, no politics can possibly counter capital until people value time energy over everything else, right? And so, yeah, I that's not on the radar for Byung Chul. And so he's challenging the idea of unlimited freedom as not really freedom, the same way that Todd McGowan does. But then his proposed solution is become like a flower and just be. And it's like, it's almost like as a quilting point, he might as well just end it as, well, just read The Power of Now. You know, here's all this theory, and I'm going to totally diagnose the current situation, but then I'll say just do The Power of Now. Be the Eckhart Tolle. And it's kind of like Heidegger's late poetic period of just, you know, just being and like wandering on the hills, and you know, it kind of lends itself to a sort of hippie thing, and I think there is something to it because we should go do that. We should go do that. It is important to deterritorialize the unconscious, to go get a nature rinse, to be in nature, to do camping that isn't instrumentalized by trying to read entire books and do all the cool shit that we're doing out here. That stuff does matter. It's not an either or. And the stuff we're doing is more important. So I just wanted to stick up for us.
Yeah, man. Like, trying to come up with a structure that allows for truly de-instrumentalized nature rinses. Like, you can do the thing. I mean, just like always, it always comes back to, like, you can go live in the woods, but you're still failing to really escape anything. Like, sure, we could come out here for 4 days, just fucking eat edibles and lay in the sun and hang out. But then that would be a one-off. Like, the fact that we came out here and we're having a lot of fun, we're hanging out, there's moments of solitude. You know, we're all kind of getting our little self-care, whatever, while we're here.
We've all gotten solitude.
Yeah.
We've all gone and written on our own.
Yeah.
We've all stood around and listened to songs and danced and sang. We've all done a lot of these things. I'm about to go jump in the water before I head into town just to give myself a quick rinse. But we did this too.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, is that people always make e-readers versus books versus audiobooks some either or game, or reading versus writing versus just chilling and being a flower. No, there's always room for reading. Stop letting people lie to you. There's always room for reading, and it's not something you have to do inside of your own head in silence. It's more fun to do it with a friend.
This is true.
That's the best thing, is that, I don't know, no one else is on the internet trying to tell you, find a friend and read books.
Yeah.
And just actually do it. People think, oh, you got to go read in quiet by yourself, all in your head, and then come to a book discussion group that was scheduled.
No one else read it.
Where no one else really read it, and everyone sits around and bullshits and yaps. It's like, no, just read the book together.
And also, in a sense, we are strictly adhering to the code because Capital is telling us you can have it all. You can have everything both ways and any way, and it's all there, it's all available, and we're actually taking that seriously. We are doing it. We are adhering to the code strictly in order to try and break it or try and break free of it.
And I think Baudrillard was onto something when he thinks that conformity to the code actually can have a chance to take it to its limit and cause a reversibility. And that's because we're kind of like telling Capital to put its money where its mouth is. And when we do that,
it's just empty promises.
Yeah, because actually it requires time, energy to do higher forms of consumption that money can't buy you this, right? Well, actually, if you gave me enough money and I didn't have to work anymore, then I could do a lot more of this. That's true. But a society where everyone's able to do this with one another cannot be supported by a society where all of our time energy is being reduced to labor power.
Yeah, the fact that it's open-ended, like say someone were to come along and be a patron, but they would probably assume some type of ownership at that point, and that would defeat the project because ultimately it is an open-ended thing to try and like re-quilt the 8 billion fractured fucking worlds together into a new world. So it has to be open-ended. So if you're out there and you have a lot of means and you want to support, do that, but also do it with the knowledge that it won't be proprietary. Unless it's a lot of fucking money. Like a lot.
If you give us enough, okay, we'll talk, okay. But for sure, okay, yeah. So on that note, then don't forget that there's an app on the Android store, on the iOS store. Don't forget to sign up for the website. That's how you get emails. That's how you know about things that are happening. Make sure to, when you sign up and or after the fact, make sure that's just not going to your spam account. If you ever get locked out of your account, that's probably why. The confirmation probably went to your spam account. Check out the store. Check out ways to donate and support. Check out the books, the publications that already exist. Check out the upcoming conferences and tours if there's information available about that stuff. If you're interested in publishing with us, you should first spend some serious time going through underground theory and paying attention to the actual essays in there. Pay attention to the actual subject matters of the existing courses and see how it relates to you and your specificity and your own projects. But don't just come out of nowhere with your own projects and try to get published with us. No, try to tie it into a more sustained dialogue with what we're doing, and then we'll take it more seriously. Because a lot of people are like, oh, read my master's thesis. Read this book. Read that article. Do this, do that. Do this, do that. We've done a lot. Stop telling us to do things. Go actually work through the stuff that we've been doing. And then once the stuff that we've done spurs you, inspires you to write something that's, you know, singular and actually engaging with what we're doing, then that'll be a great way to get into dialogue with us. And we'll probably come to your fucking city just because we want to meet you and do an event with you the way that we did with Andrew, the way that we did with Nick, the way that we did with Philip, the way that we've done with so many people on the tour that we're currently on.
Yeah. And you might find that after you do spend some time getting to know what conversations we've been having. Yeah, maybe you'll find this isn't your scene, and that's cool too. We've spent a lot of time like thinking about the space and the scene and the kind of norms and conventions and all that stuff, and maybe it might be abrasive or grating or a little sensational or shocking or whatever. And if that's not your cup of tea, that's fine. But also, like, this is a non-space on the internet that has been intentionally crafted. And you shouldn't take that for granted.
Don't try to treat it like other spaces.
Yeah.
So yeah, thank you for listening. If you made it this far in the video, I'd like to know who you are. If you don't like to comment, but you love to consume Theory Underground stuff, then you owe me money. Straight up. That goes out to Bauer. You supposedly watch all Bauer, you supposedly watch all my shit, but you never comment. You don't engage. So then I don't know what you actually are thinking. It's just like, I don't know. I'm just calling out the one person who I know for sure does it. But there's a lot of you who don't comment. So, you know, there's a way to show support that doesn't put your face out or your name out or your handle or whatever. It doesn't even require like doing extra work, but like, you know, for the price of a latte, you can, you know, contribute towards my analysis that I hopefully will get to pay for someday, because I just want to know what analysis is like, and that costs money.
You need to make a commercial of like the crying African child for the cost of a Starbucks latte once every day. You can support these hungry children in Africa. It's just Dave, dude.
This is terrible. This is terrible. We're gonna stop.
Congratulations. If you're here, don't cancel us.
It's impossible.
It's impossible.
Okay. Peace. It didn't stop.
It's still going?
It's still going.